Keith Harris crashes through the dense undergrowth, his breath ragged as he stumbles upon a sight that freezes him in his tracks. In a small clearing, an alien girl lies motionless, her lavender skin pallid and covered in a sheen of sweat. This is no ordinary alien. She's a lesion, a member of the reclusive species that has long avoided human contact. The xenobiologist in Keith immediately recognizes the gravity of the situation. He's deep in the uncharted jungles of a distant planet, face to face with a critically ill member of a technologically advanced race. His mind races with the implications. This encounter is unprecedented, a potential diplomatic breakthrough or interstellar incident waiting to happen. Keith approaches cautiously, his med scanner humming as it analyzes the alien's vital signs. The results are grim. She's suffering from an unknown illness, her body temperature dangerously high and organs on the verge of failure. Keith glances around, noticing signs of an abandoned camp. Realization dawns. This girl is the sole survivor of her village. His comm unit crackles to life. Harris, report your position. You've strayed off course. Keith hesitates, knowing his next actions could alter the course of human history. The United Earth Space Agency's non-interference protocols are clear, but the opportunity before him is too significant to ignore. He makes his decision in a heartbeat. Negative base. I've encountered a situation requiring immediate attention. Stand by for further updates. He kneels beside the Elysian girl, reaching for his medkit. As he administers a broad-spectrum antibiotic, her eyes flutter open, revealing irises of deep violet. "I'm Keith," he says softly. "I'm here to help. Can you tell me your name?" Her voice is weak, barely a whisper. "Cora, my people, all gone. The ruins." Keith leans closer, intrigued. "Ruins? What ruins, Cora?" But she slipped back into unconsciousness. Keith's mind whirs with possibilities. Ancient ruins, a decimated village, a mysterious illness. The pieces start to form a complex puzzle. As he works to stabilize Cora's condition, Keith knows he's crossing a line. His superiors will demand he cease all interaction and return to base immediately. The risks of interspecies conflict and biological contamination are too great in their eyes. But Keith sees beyond the immediate dangers to the potential benefits, not just for humanity, but for both their species. He glances at Cora's prone form, her chest rising and falling with each labored breath. In helping her, he could gain invaluable knowledge about Elysian biology. If he can earn her trust, she might share the advanced medical knowledge her people possess. Knowledge that could revolutionize human healthcare and save countless lives. But as the jungle's shadows lengthen, Keith becomes aware of movement in the undergrowth. He's not alone out here, and not everyone converging on this location has peaceful intentions. Rival human factions, hostile alien species, all drawn by the potential power hidden in those mysterious ruins Cora mentioned. Keith checks his weapon and secures the perimeter of their small camp. He has no idea of the challenges that lie ahead, but one thing is certain. He's committed now. To saving Cora, to uncovering the secrets of the ruins, and to protecting the valuable knowledge that could change everything. As night falls on the alien world, Keith settles in for a long vigil. The fate of two species may well rest in his hands, and the real adventure is only beginning. Keith's eyes never left Cora's face as he worked tirelessly to stabilize her condition. Hours passed, marked only by the shifting patterns of light filtering through the dense canopy above. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, color began to return to her lavender skin. As the alien sun dipped below the horizon, Cora's eyes fluttered open once more. This time, her gaze was clearer, more focused. Keith leaned in, his voice soft but urgent. "Cora, can you hear me? How are you feeling?" She blinked, her violet irises adjusting to the dim light. I I am better, she whispered, her voice stronger than before. You helped me. Keith nodded, relief washing over him. I did. But Cora, I need to understand what happened. You mentioned ruins earlier. Can you tell me more? Cora's expression shifted, a mix of fear and resignation crossing her features. She pushed herself up to a sitting position, wincing slightly. Our people, we have a gift, a technology that allows us to adapt, to change our bodies to suit any environment. Keith's eyes widened, his mind racing with the implications. That's incredible. Is that why your species has remained so isolated? Cora nodded. We fear exploitation. But there is more. She glanced around, as if checking for unseen listeners. My expedition. We went to ancient ruins, structures left by those who came before. We triggered something there, a dormant pathogen. Our adaptability, it couldn't keep up. Keith absorbed this information, the pieces falling into place. And that's what made you sick? But why did it affect me? It was engineered, specific to our biology, Cora explained. But the research data, it's still there, in the ruins. We must retrieve it. Keith stood, his decision made. We'll go together. I'll help you get that data. As he helped Cora to her feet, his comm unit crackled to life once more. Keith froze, listening intently to the intercepted transmission. Terran Expansion League units converge on Sector 7. Alien artifacts detected. Secure the site and neutralize any non-human entities. Keith's mind focused. He knew of the TL, human supremacists who viewed alien technology as their birthright. He turned to Cora, his voice urgent. We need to move, now. There are others coming, and they won't hesitate to harm you. Cora's eyes widened in fear, but she nodded resolutely. Keith quickly packed his essentials, then knelt in front of her. Climb on my back. You're not strong enough to make the journey on your own. As Cora settled against him, Keith felt an odd tingling sensation where their skin made contact. He pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the task at hand. With a deep breath, he plunged into the dense jungle. The alien forest was a cacophony of sounds and a riot of colors, even in the growing darkness. Keith's enhanced training allowed him to navigate the treacherous terrain, but every step was a challenge. Thick vines threatened to trip him, while the humid air made breathing laborious. Hours passed, and Keith became aware of a strange clarity in his senses. The jungle seemed more vibrant, more alive. He could pick out individual scents, hear the faintest rustle of leaves. It was as if his entire body had become more attuned to the environment. Cora, he whispered, ducking under a low-hanging branch. I think something's happening to me. My senses, they're changing. He felt her tense against his back. It's possible my adaptive abilities are influencing you, she admitted. I've never been in such prolonged contact with another species before. Keith's mind raced with the possibilities, both thrilling and terrifying. But before he could respond, a distant sound caught his attention, the unmistakable whine of a hover engine. Tell, he hissed, veering off their path and into a denser patch of foliage. He crouched low, Cora still clinging to his back, as a sleek, black vehicle passed overhead. We're close to the ruins, Cora whispered. But so are they. Keith nodded grimly. Then we'll use them as a distraction. Your people, they'll be coming for you, won't they? Yes, Cora confirmed. My brother, Zarn, he leads our rescue teams. But they will see all humans as a threat. Perfect, Keith muttered. We'll let the Tell and your people keep each other busy while we slip into the ruins. They pressed on, Keith's newly enhanced senses allowing him to avoid detection by the increasing number of telepatrols. As they neared the edge of the jungle, an ancient stone structure loomed before them, its surface covered in bioluminescent moss. Keith took a step forward, but Cora's grip on him suddenly tightened. "Wait," she gasped. "There's a security measure, an energy field. It will dash." Her warning came too late. An invisible force slammed into them, sending Keith stumbling backward. Cora slid from his back, her body convulsing as the energy field wreaked havoc on her alien physiology. Keith knelt beside her, panic rising in his chest. All his efforts to heal her were being undone in seconds. He looked from Cora's writhing form to the impassive face of the ruins, knowing that the key to saving her and potentially revolutionizing human space exploration lay just beyond that shimmering barrier. With TL forces closing in from one side and an Elysian rescue team approaching from the other, Keith faced an impossible choice. He had to find a way to disable the ancient security system, evade both human and alien pursuers, and keep Cora alive, all while the clock was ticking. The ruins held the answers, but reaching them had just become far more complicated than he could have imagined. Keith's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The energy field pulsed before him, an invisible barrier that had incapacitated Cora in seconds. He glanced at her writhing form, then back at the impassive face of the ruins. Time was running out. Drawing upon years of xenobiological research, Keith analyzed the shimmering patterns in the air. The field's behavior reminded him of electromagnetic phenomena he'd studied on Earth. An idea formed, born of desperation and scientific intuition. Keith rummaged through his equipment, pulling out components from various devices. His hands moved with purpose, connecting wires and repurposing power cells. The result was crude but functional, a makeshift deflector device. Heart pounding, he activated the improvised gadget. A low hum filled the air as the device projected its own field. Keith watched in amazement as a small opening appeared in the barrier, just large enough for a person to pass through. Without hesitation, he scooped up Cora's limp form. "Hold on," he whispered, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. Keith took a deep breath and stepped forward, bracing himself for potential feedback. To his relief, they passed through the gap unharmed. The interior of the ruins was a stark contrast to the lush jungle outside. Keith found himself in a vast chamber, its walls lined with sleek, unfamiliar technology. At the center stood a towering structure of crystalline material, pulsating with an otherworldly glow. As Keith approached the crystal, Cora stirred in his arms. Her eyes fluttered open, clarity returning to her gaze. "The crystal," she murmured, her voice gaining strength. "It's calling to me." Keith set her down gently, keeping a supportive arm around her shoulders. He watched in fascination as color returned to her skin, her recovery visibly accelerating in proximity to the crystal. Before either could speak further, a thunderous explosion shook the chamber. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. Keith's handheld scanner lit up with multiple approaching signals. "Tell forces," he growled, recognizing the energy signatures of their equipment. "They've breached the outer defenses." Cora's eyes widened. "And there," she pointed to another display on Keith's device. "Those signals. It's Zarn. My people have arrived as well." Keith's mind whirred, assessing their options. They were caught between two advancing forces, each likely to view him and Cora as enemies or, worse, as test subjects to be captured and studied. He turned to the crystal structure, noting the complex array of controls at its base. "Cora, can you interface with the system?" She nodded, already moving towards the controls. "I'll need your help. Our technologies have diverged, but there may be commonalities we can exploit." Keith joined her at the control panel. Together, they began to activate the ancient systems. Cora's innate understanding of Elysian technology complemented Keith's adaptive problem-solving skills. Holographic displays sprang to life around them, filling the air with streams of data. "We need to download everything," Keith said urgently. "This data could revolutionize our understanding of adaptive biology, maybe even lead to breakthroughs in human medicine." Cora nodded, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Initiating download sequence. But Keith, be careful. This level of exposure to our technology, it might have unforeseen effects on your physiology." As if on cue, Keith felt a strange tingling sensation spreading through his body. His vision sharpened, colors becoming more vivid. He found himself instinctively understanding complex Elysian interfaces that should have been indecipherable. Another explosion rocked the chamber, closer this time. The ruins' defensive systems hummed to life, sealing off entrances and creating a temporary barrier against the invading forces. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the chamber. The crystal's pulsing increased in intensity, its glow becoming painfully bright. "It's overloading," Cora shouted over the din. "The activation must have triggered a fail-safe mechanism. If we don't stabilize it, the entire complex will be destroyed." Keith's newly enhanced senses took in the chamber, processing information at an accelerated rate. "We need to reroute the power flow," he said, moving to another set of controls. "Cora, can you modulate the crystal's resonance frequency?" She nodded, her hands already in motion. "I'll try to synchronize it with the surrounding systems." "But Keith, how did you know about the power flow?" He shook his head, bemused. I'm not sure. It's like I can see the energy patterns, understand their flow." As they worked, the chamber continued to shake. Outside, they could hear the muffled sounds of weapons fire. The Tel forces and Zarn's team had encountered each other, resulting in a tense standoff. Keith and Cora moved in perfect synchronization, their efforts creating a unique synergy. Bit by bit, the crystal's pulsing stabilized. The alarms quieted, replaced by the steady hum of machinery. "Download complete," Cora announced, relief evident in her voice. Keith allowed himself a moment of elation, but it was short-lived. The strain of their efforts had taken its toll on the ancient systems. Cracks began to appear in the chamber walls, chunks of stone falling from the ceiling. "We need to get out of here," Keith said, grabbing the data storage device. His enhanced vision caught sight of a subtle variation in the wall's pattern. There, an escape tunnel. They raced towards a hidden passage as the chamber began to collapse around them. Keith ushered Cora inside, taking one last look at the incredible technology they were leaving behind. Then he plunged into the tunnel, the thunderous sound of the imploding chamber echoing behind them. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading them deep into the planet's crust. Keith's newfound abilities allowed him to navigate the darkness with ease, guiding Cora through treacherous passages. After what felt like hours, they emerged into the alien jungle, far from their original location. The dense canopy above filtered the harsh sunlight, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. Keith helped Cora to her feet, both of them breathing heavily from their ordeal. They were alive, and they had the data. But as Keith's enhanced senses picked up distant sounds of search parties, he knew their adventure was just getting started. "We need to keep moving," he said, scanning the horizon. "There's a mountain range to the north. If we can reach it, we might be able to lose our pursuers and find a way to contact my ship." Cora nodded, her violet eyes meeting his. "Together, then," she said, her voice filled with newfound trust. As they set off into the uncharted jungle, Keith felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. They carried with them the key to unlocking the Elysians' incredible abilities, knowledge that could change the course of human history. But with both human and Elysian forces in pursuit, the challenge of safeguarding that knowledge and finding a way off the planet loomed large. The alien sun began its descent towards the horizon, casting long shadows through the jungle. Keith and Cora pressed on, their unlikely partnership forged in the crucible of shared danger and discovery. What lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Their journey had only just begun. Begun. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. Without another word, they plunged deeper into the alien wilderness. The jungle grew denser as they progressed, the canopy above blocking out most of the sunlight. Keith's newly enhanced senses proved invaluable, allowing him to detect subtle changes in the environment. He ducked under low-hanging vines and sidestepped hidden sinkholes with uncanny precision. Cora moved with fluid grace, her knowledge of the local flora evident in every step. She paused occasionally, touching plants with her fingertips and closing her eyes in concentration. "This one's safe," she'd murmur, or, "Avoid the red flowers. They release a neurotoxin when disturbed." As they traversed a particularly treacherous stretch of terrain, Keith's foot slipped on a moss-covered rock. He stumbled, nearly falling into a thorny thicket. Cora's hand shot out, steadying him with surprising strength. "Thanks," Keith breathed, acutely aware of her touch. "I'm still getting used to these new abilities." Cora nodded, her violet eyes studying him intently. "Your adaptation is progressing faster than I expected. It's fascinating." They pressed on, the sounds of the jungle a constant backdrop to their journey. Strange, multi-limbed creatures scurried through the underbrush, while unseen beings called to each other in ethereal tones. As the day wore on, they encountered their first major obstacle, a wide, fast-flowing river that cut through the landscape like a liquid barrier. The water churned violently, and Keith's enhanced vision caught glimpses of sleek, predatory forms moving beneath the surface. "We can't cross here," Cora said, her voice tinged with concern. "Those are vexfins, highly aggressive carnivores. They can strip a grave ox to the bone in seconds." Keith scanned the riverbank, his mind racing. "We'll build a raft," he decided, already moving towards a stand of fallen trees. "Help me gather these trunks and any vines you can find." Together, they worked to construct a makeshift vessel. Keith's Earth survival training kicked in, guiding his hands as he lashed the logs together. Cora's strength and agility proved crucial as they maneuvered the heavy materials into place. As they prepared to launch their raft, Keith noticed Cora's brow furrowing in concentration. A faint, blue-tinged aura began to emanate from her skin. "What are you doing?" he asked, fascinated. "Creating a bioelectric field," she explained. "It should repel the vexfins long enough for us to cross." They pushed off from the shore, the current immediately threatening to overwhelm them. Keith gripped a makeshift oar, his muscles straining as he fought to keep them on course. Cora knelt at the center of the raft, her eyes closed in intense focus as she maintained the protective field. Sleek, toothy forms circled their craft, drawn by the disturbance but unable to approach. Keith watched in amazement as the creatures veered away whenever they neared the edge of Cora's energy barrier. As they neared the opposite bank, a particularly large vexfin launched itself from the water, jaws gaping. Keith reacted instinctively, swinging his with inhuman speed and strength. The makeshift weapon connected with a solid thwack, sending the creature tumbling back into the river. They hit the far shore with a jolt, scrambling onto land as their raft began to break apart. Keith helped Cora to her feet, both of them breathing heavily from the exertion. "That was impressive," Cora said, looking at Keith with newfound respect. "Your reflexes are far beyond normal human parameters now." Keith flexed his fingers, marveling at the strength he felt coursing through his body. "It's like I can anticipate movements before they happen. Is this how you always feel?" Cora shook her head. "Our abilities are adaptive, remember? You're evolving to meet the challenges of this environment." I've never seen anything like it in a non-Elysian. As night began to fall, they sought shelter, eventually finding a secluded cave set into a rocky hillside. The close quarters forced them into proximity, their bodies generating much-needed warmth in the cooling air. Keith busied himself with setting up a small camp, acutely aware of Cora's presence. He found his gaze lingering on the graceful curve of her neck, the way her skin seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. Cora, for her part, seemed equally affected. Her touch lingered when she handed him their dwindling supplies, and her eyes often met his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. As they tended to each other's minor wounds, scrapes and bruises acquired during their river crossing, the air between them grew thick with unspoken tension. Keith's fingers trembled slightly as he applied a healing salve to a cut on Cora's arm, the contact sending sparks of electricity through his body. "Keith," Cora said softly, her voice husky. We should rest. Tomorrow will bring new challenges." He nodded, forcing himself to pull away. They settled down on opposite sides of the small cave, but sleep proved elusive. Keith's enhanced hearing picked up Cora's rapid heartbeat, matching the thunderous pace of his own. As dawn broke, they emerged from the cave, both acutely aware of the growing attraction between them, but unable to act on it. The weight of their mission and the potential consequences of interspecies intimacy loomed large in their minds. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Keith's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the canopy. "Tell drones," he hissed, spotting the sleek, metallic shapes weaving through the treetops. Cora's eyes widened. "And there!" She pointed to a faint shimmer in the air, barely visible to Keith even with his enhanced vision. "Biosensors. My people are closing in as well." They exchanged a grim look, knowing their pursuers were drawing ever closer. Without a word, they gathered their meager supplies and plunged back into the dense jungle, the race to reach the hidden Elysian city growing more urgent with each passing moment. As they navigated through a particularly thick section of underbrush, Keith's foot caught on something metallic. He bent down, brushing away layers of vegetation to reveal a corroded panel covered in intricate symbols. "Cora," he called softly, "look at this. It's Elysian, isn't it?" She knelt beside him, her eyes widening in recognition. "It's an access panel for an old outpost," she breathed. "If we can activate it, we might find shelter and answers." Together, they worked to clear away the overgrowth, revealing a hidden door set into the hillside. As Cora interfaced with the ancient technology, Keith kept watch, his senses on high alert for any sign of their pursuers. With a low hum, the door slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor beyond. They slipped inside, the door sealing behind them with a soft hiss. As lights flickered to life around them, Keith and Cora found themselves surrounded by dormant Elysian technology, holding the promise of both sanctuary and revelation. Their eyes met, a mix of hope and trepidation reflected in their gazes. Whatever secrets this outpost held, they knew it was just the beginning of their journey, one that would test the limits of their growing bond and the boundaries between their species. As they ventured deeper into the outpost, the ancient technology hummed to life around them, responding to Cora's presence. "This way," Cora said, her fingers tracing glowing symbols on a control panel. "There's a map of the planet's surface here. We can use it to plan our route to the hidden city." Keith leaned in, studying the holographic projection that sprang to life. His eyes widened as he took in the vast expanse of jungle, followed by a formidable mountain range. "That's going to be a challenging trek," he mused, tracing the path with his finger. Cora nodded, her expression grim. "The jungle is treacherous, but it's the mountains that concern me. They're known for their unpredictable weather and steep cliffs." As if on cue, a distant rumble echoed through the outpost. Keith's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of tell drones, growing closer by the second. "We need to move," he said urgently. "Now!" They gathered what supplies they could from the outpost and slipped back into the jungle, their pace quickening as they pushed towards the looming mountains. The dense foliage gradually thinned, giving way to rocky terrain and sparse vegetation. As they began their ascent, Keith's newly enhanced abilities came to the forefront. He found himself leaping from rock to rock with surprising agility, his fingers finding purchase on the smallest of handholds. Cora watched him with a mixture of amazement and pride. "Your adaptation is progressing rapidly," she observed as they paused to catch their breath on a narrow ledge. "It's as if your body is evolving to meet each new challenge." Keith flexed his fingers, marveling at the strength he felt coursing through his body. "It's incredible," he admitted, "but I couldn't do this without you. Your knowledge, your guidance, it's been invaluable." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Keith found himself leaning closer, drawn by an irresistible force. A sudden gust of wind broke the moment, nearly knocking them off balance. Keith's hand shot out, steadying Cora against the cliff face. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through both of them. "We should keep moving," Cora said, her voice husky. Keith nodded, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. As they climbed higher, the air grew thin and cold. Keith's enhanced vision caught sight of a dark opening in the rock face, partially hidden behind an outcropping. "Look," he said, pointing. "Could that be a cave?" Cora squinted. Then her eyes widened in recognition. "It's more than that," she breathed. "It's an entrance to the old transportation network. I thought they were all sealed off centuries ago." They approached cautiously, Cora running her hands over the weathered stone. With a soft click, a section of the rock face slid away, revealing a dimly lit tunnel beyond. "This could be our chance," Keith said, peering into the darkness. "If these tunnels are still operational, they could lead us straight to the hidden city." Cora hesitated, her brow furrowed. "It's risky. The tunnels are old, potentially unstable. We don't know what we might encounter down there." Keith met her gaze, his expression resolute. "We've come this far together. I trust you, Cora. Whatever's down there, we'll face it as a team." After a moment's consideration, Cora nodded. They stepped into the tunnel, the entrance sealing behind them with a soft hiss. The air inside was stale but breathable. As they ventured deeper, bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie blue glow along the walls. Keith's enhanced senses picked up the faint hum of ancient machinery coming to life. They rounded a corner and found themselves in a vast chamber. At its center stood a sleek, pod-like structure, clearly of Elysian design, but unlike anything Keith had ever seen. "A transport pod," Cora explained, her voice filled with awe. "I've only read about these in historical texts. If we can get it working, it could cut days off our journey." Keith approached the pod, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns etched into its surface. As if responding to his touch, lights flickered to life along its length. He grinned, a surge of excitement coursing through him. "Well, let's see what this baby can do." Working together, they managed to access the pod's control systems. Keith's technical expertise, combined with his newfound intuition, allowed him to navigate the alien interface with surprising ease. After several tense minutes, the pod hummed to life, its doors sliding open with a soft whoosh. "Ladies first," Keith said with a grin, gesturing for Cora to enter. The interior was cramped, forcing them to press close together as the doors sealed shut. Keith's breath caught in his throat as he became acutely aware of Cora's proximity, the subtle floral scent of her skin filling his senses. With a lurch, the pod shot forward, accelerating rapidly as it raced through the ancient tunnels. The close quarters and erratic movements caused them to sway against each other, their bodies in constant contact. Keith struggled to focus on the control panel, his heart racing for more than just the pod speed. Cora's hand brushed against his as she reached to steady herself, sending a shiver down his spine. Suddenly, the pod shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as the vehicle began to slow. "Something's wrong," Keith said, his fingers flying over the controls. "We're losing power." With a final, sputtering groan, the pod ground to a halt. The doors slid open, revealing a vast, dimly lit cavern stretching out before them. As they stepped out, Keith and Cora found themselves surrounded by a breathtaking sight. Bioluminescent plants cast a soft, ethereal glow throughout the cavern. Strange, prehistoric-like creatures moved in the distance, while overhead, bat-like beings soared on silent wings. "Incredible," Cora breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "An entire ecosystem, hidden away for who knows how long." Keith nodded, equally awestruck. "This could be huge, Cora. Think of what we could learn here about Elysian evolution, about the planet's history." As they ventured further into the cavern, collecting samples and recording data, Keith noticed a change coming over him. His skin began to emit a faint, bioluminescent glow, mirroring the flora around him. His senses sharpened even further, allowing him to pick up the slightest movements and sounds within the vast space. Cora, too, seemed affected by their surroundings. Her movements became more fluid, her recovery from the bioweapon's effects visibly accelerating. As they worked, Keith became aware of eyes upon them. Turning slowly, he spotted a group of figures watching from the shadows. Neither human nor Elysian, but something else entirely. "Cora," he said softly, gesturing towards the observers, "I think we have company." The cave-dwelling beings approached cautiously, their features a strange blend of Elysian and something more primitive. Cora stepped forward, her body language open and non-threatening. Slowly, haltingly, she began to communicate with them through a series of gestures and sounds. "They want us to follow them," she said after a moment. I think they might be able to help us." As they prepared to follow their new guides, a violent tremor shook the cavern. Rocks began to fall from the ceiling, splashing into a previously unseen lake. The cave dwellers chittered in alarm, gesturing urgently for Keith and Cora to follow. With one last look at the malfunctioning transport pod, they plunged deeper into the cavern, the ground still shaking beneath their feet. Keith's mind raced with possibilities. Had the tell found them? Was this a natural occurrence, or something more sinister? As they ran, he caught glimpses of a vast underground settlement ahead, its structures blending seamlessly with the natural rock formations. Whatever secrets this hidden world held, Keith knew they were about to uncover something that could change everything, for humans, Elysians, and perhaps for the entire planet. The tremors intensified as they approached the settlement, the cavern's stability growing more precarious by the second. Keith and Cora exchanged a grim look, both knowing that their time to uncover the truth and find a way to the hidden Elysian city was rapidly running out. Out! The cave dwellers gestured frantically, urging them towards a narrow passageway that seemed to lead deeper into the heart of the mountain. As they raced through the crumbling cavern, Keith's enhanced senses picked up the sound of falling rocks and panicked cries. Without hesitation, he and Cora sprang into action, working alongside the cave dwellers to evacuate the underground settlement. Keith's newfound strength and agility proved invaluable as he lifted fallen debris and carried injured cave dwellers to safety. His muscles strained as he hefted a large boulder, clearing a path for a group of frightened children. Sweat beaded on his brow, his skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Meanwhile, Cora's adaptive abilities allowed her to quickly decipher and operate ancient Elysian technology scattered throughout the settlement. Her fingers flew across control panels, stabilizing sections of the cavern and creating safe passages for the evacuees. "Keith," Cora called out, her voice barely audible over the rumbling. I've managed to reinforce the eastern tunnels. Direct everyone that way." He nodded, guiding a stream of cave dwellers towards the newly secured route. As he turned to check for stragglers, a deafening crack split the air. Keith looked up to see a massive stalactite breaking free from the ceiling, plummeting towards a group of cave dwellers frozen in terror. Without conscious thought, Keith's body moved. He launched himself forward, his enhanced speed propelling him across the cavern floor. Time seemed to slow as he reached the group, his hands connecting with their bodies and shoving them clear of danger. Pain exploded through Keith's leg as the stalactite struck, pinning him to the ground. He gritted his teeth, fighting against the wave of agony threatening to overwhelm him. "Keith!" Cora's voice cut through the haze of pain. She was at his side in an instant, her eyes wide with concern. "Don't move. I'm going to try something." Her hands hovered over his injured leg, a soft blue glow emanating from her palms. Keith felt a strange warmth spreading through his body, centering on the wound. To his amazement, the pain began to subside, replaced by an odd tingling sensation. As Cora worked, Keith watched in fascination as his flesh knitted itself back together at an unprecedented rate. Within minutes, the wound had closed, leaving only a faint scar as evidence of the injury. "How?" Keith began, but Cora shook her head. "I'm not sure," she admitted, helping him to his feet. "Your body's response to lesion healing techniques is remarkable. We'll have to study this further when we have time." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the chaos around them faded away. Keith was acutely aware of Cora's hand on his arm, the warmth of her body so close to his. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. A thunderous crash snapped them back to reality. The cavern was becoming increasingly unstable. "We need to keep moving," Keith said, reluctantly breaking contact. As they continued to assist with the evacuation, Keith's enhanced vision caught sight of an oddly shaped crevice in the cavern wall. "Cora, look at this," he called, running his hand along the edge of the opening. Cora's eyes widened in recognition. "It's a hidden entrance," she breathed. "Help me open it." Together, they managed to activate the concealed mechanism, revealing a chamber beyond. As they stepped inside, lights flickered to life, illuminating rows upon rows of data crystals and holographic displays. "An archive," Cora gasped, her fingers tracing the ancient symbols. This could contain centuries of Elysian knowledge. Keith watched as Cora interfaced with the system, her expression growing more excited by the second. "Keith, this is incredible," she said. "It's not just historical data. There's information about the bioweapon affecting me, and the location of the hidden city." Their elation was short-lived. A distant explosion rocked the cavern, followed by the unmistakable sound of energy weapons. "Tell," Keith growled, his enhanced hearing picking up the approaching footsteps. "We need to go. Now." Cora nodded grimly, downloading as much data as she could onto a portable Elysian device. "We can't let this fall into their hands," she said, her voice heavy with regret. With a few deft commands, Cora initiated the archive's self-destruct sequence. As they raced out of the chamber, the sound of frying circuits and shattering crystals echoed behind them. They emerged to find the cavern in chaos. Tell's soldiers, led by a scarred man with cold eyes, were advancing through the tunnels, weapons raised. "Commander Vance," Cora whispered, her voice tight with fear. Keith's mind raced, searching for an escape route. His gaze fell on a dark opening near the cavern floor, water lapping at its edges. "There," he said, pointing. "It's our only chance." As they sprinted towards the underwater tunnel, a group of cave dwellers intercepted them. To Keith's surprise, they pressed crude breathing apparatus into their hands, along with a rough map etched onto a piece of bioluminescent fungus. "Thank you," Cora said softly, her eyes conveying the depth of her gratitude. Without another moment's hesitation, Keith and Cora plunge into the dark waters, the sound of Vance's angry shouts fading behind them as they swam into the unknown. Underwater passages. The cold water enveloped them, darkness pressing in from all sides. Keith's enhanced vision adjusted quickly, allowing him to make out the rough contours of the tunnel walls. Cora swam beside him, her movements graceful and efficient in the aquatic environment. As they pushed forward, Keith's senses tingled with a growing awareness of their surroundings. The water seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy, and strange currents tugged at their bodies. Suddenly, a massive shape loomed before them, blocking their path. Keith's heart raced as he recognized the form of a colossal predatory sea creature. Its elongated body was covered in iridescent scales, and rows of razor-sharp teeth glinted in the faint bioluminescent glow. More shapes emerged from the gloom, an entire school of these fearsome beasts. Cora's eyes widened in recognition. She gestured urgently to Keith, pointing out the creature's sensitive areas. Gills that pulsed with an eerie light and eyes that seemed to glow from within. Keith nodded, his mind racing as he analyzed their movement patterns and behavior. An idea struck him. Keith tapped Cora's shoulder and began to swim in a spiraling pattern, his skin emitting a soft, pulsating glow. Cora quickly caught on, matching his movements and adding her own natural Elysian bioluminescence to the display. Together, they created a mesmerizing light show, mimicking the movements of smaller prey animals. The large predators turned, their attention captured by the swirling patterns of light. As Keith and Cora continued their synchronized dance, a path began to clear through the school of creatures. Seizing their chance, they swam swiftly through the opening, their hearts pounding as they felt the rush of water displaced by the massive bodies around them. They pushed on, not daring to look back until they were well clear of the predators. As they approached the outskirts of what appeared to be an underwater metropolis, Keith's enhanced vision picked out the shimmer of an energy barrier. Cora swam towards a control panel set into a nearby rock formation, her hands moving deftly over the alien interface. Frustration crossed her features as the system rejected her attempts to deactivate the barrier. She turned to Keith, gesturing for him to try. Hesitantly, he placed his hand on the panel. To his shock, it responded to his touch, a series of lights flashing in sequence. The barrier before them flickered and parted, revealing a breathtaking sight. Towering structures of crystal-like material rose from the ocean floor, channeling and amplifying the bioluminescent light of the surrounding sea life. The city pulsed with an otherworldly beauty, its architecture a seamless blend of nature and advanced technology. As they swam to the opening, the barrier closed behind them. They found themselves in a pocket of air, the water held at bay by some unseen force. Keith and Cora removed their breathing apparatus, taking in deep gulps of the surprisingly fresh air. Incredible, Keith breathed, his eyes wide as he took in their surroundings. Before Cora could respond, movement caught their attention. A group of Elysians approached, led by a tall, slender figure with piercing eyes. Keith tensed, ready for a confrontation, but Cora placed a calming hand on his arm. "Dr. Lyra," Cora said, her voice a mix of respect and wariness. The Elysian scientist's gaze swept over them, lingering on Keith with a look of intense curiosity. "You've brought a human to our sanctuary," she said, her tone sharp. "Explain yourself." As Cora began to speak, Dr. Lyra's eyes narrowed, focusing on Keith's faintly glowing skin. "Wait," she interrupted, stepping closer to examine him. "Something's different about this one." Keith stood still as Dr. Lyra circled him, her expression shifting from hostility to fascination. "Remarkable," she murmured. "The adaptive response to the bioweapon. I've never seen anything like it." "The bioweapon?" Cora asked, her voice tight with concern. "You created it?" Dr. Lyra nodded, her attention still fixed on Keith. A safeguard against interspecies genetic contamination. But this was unexpected. As Dr. Lyra continued her examination, Keith's mind raced. The implications of his transformation, the advanced technology surrounding them, the potential for peace between humans and Elysians, it all swirled in his thoughts. A mix of excitement and trepidation. "We need your help," Cora said, breaking the tense silence. "The bioweapon is still active in my system, and we have information from an ancient archive that might be useful." Dr. Lyra's eyes snapped to Cora, a spark of interest igniting in their depths. "Show me," she commanded. As Cora shared the data they had recovered, Keith found himself drawn to a nearby structure. Inside, he discovered a vast array of medical equipment, far more advanced than anything he had seen on Earth. The potential applications raced through his mind. Cures for diseases, regeneration of lost limbs, perhaps even ways to extend human lifespans. A hand on his shoulder startled him from his thoughts. Cora stood beside him, her expression a mix of hope and apprehension. "Dr. Lyra and her team are preparing the treatment," she said softly. "It's going to be difficult." Keith took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I'll be right here with you," he promised. As they followed Dr. Lyra deeper into the city, Keith couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental. The secrets of this hidden Elysian metropolis, the evolving connection between him and Cora, and the looming threat of the TL, all of it was building towards a confrontation that would shape the future of both their species. The distant sound of alarms echoed through the crystalline structures, a stark reminder that their time was limited. Whatever came next, Keith knew that the choices they made in this underwater city would ripple out far beyond its shimmering walls. Barriers, threatening the safety of all within. The distant alarms grew louder, echoing through the crystalline structures of the hidden Elysian city. Keith and Cora exchanged a grim look as they realized the implications. The TL had found them. Dr. Lyra's fingers flew across a holographic interface, her face set in concentration. "Activating the city's defense systems," she announced, her voice tight with urgency. A low hum reverberated through the air as an iridescent energy shield materialized around the city's perimeter. The shield pulsed with an otherworldly light, temporarily holding off the TEL's advanced weaponry. "That won't hold them for long," Keith said, his enhanced senses picking up the distant sounds of battle. "We need to fortify the vulnerable areas." Cora nodded, her eyes scanning the city's layout displayed on a nearby screen. "There," she pointed to a section of the outer wall. "That area's structural integrity is weakened. We should focus our efforts there." As they worked to reinforce the city's defenses, Keith's ears picked up a new sound, a high-pitched whine that set his teeth on edge. He looked out through the energy shield to see a swarm of sleek, metallic shapes cutting through the water. "Underwater drones," he growled, recognizing the TEL technology. "They're equipped with plasma cutters." Without hesitation, Keith dove into the water, his body adapting seamlessly to the aquatic environment. He shot through the shield, which rippled around him like liquid glass. "Keith," Cora's voice crackled through his comm unit. "I'm tracking the drone's movements. Head northeast. There's a cluster of them trying to breach the shield." Guided by Cora's directions, Keith navigated the complex underwater terrain. His enhanced vision cut through the murky depths, allowing him to spot the drones before they detected him. The first drone never saw him coming. Keith grabbed it, his augmented strength crushing its propulsion system. As alarms blared from the disabled machine, the others in the group turned their attention to him. Keith weaved between streams of superheated plasma, the water around him instantly vaporizing into clouds of steam. He spun, kicked, and grappled, his movements fluid and precise. One by one, the drones fell silent, their lights flickering out as they sank into the abyss. As Keith dispatched the last drone, a new group of figures emerged from the gloom. His muscles tensed, ready for another fight, but he relaxed as he recognized the distinctive armor of Elysian warriors. Zarn, leading the rescue team, regarded Keith with a mix of suspicion and grudging respect. "You've changed," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the water. Keith nodded, gesturing towards the city. "We can discuss it later. Right now, we need your help." Back inside the city, Dr. Lyra worked feverishly in her lab, her eyes darting between multiple holographic displays. As Keith entered, she looked up, a spark of excitement in her eyes. "Your adaptation to our biology is remarkable," she said, gesturing for him to approach. "I believe I've found a way to replicate the process in other humans. It could bridge the gap between our species." Keith's heart raced at the implications. "What do you need me to do?" Dr. Lyra's expression turned grave. "The procedure is risky. It would involve using the genetic manipulation device to alter your DNA further. There's no guarantee of success, and the changes would be permanent." Before Keith could respond, alarms blared through the city. Cora's voice came through the comm system, urgent and breathless. "We've got intruders. A Telstrike team has breached the lower levels through a maintenance tunnel." Keith's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of distant gunfire. "I'm on it," he said, already moving towards the door. As he raced through the crystalline corridors, Keith's mind processed the layout of the city, plotting the most efficient route to intercept the intruders. He rounded a corner and came face to face with 3 Tel soldiers, their weapons raised. Time seemed to slow as Keith's augmented reflexes kicked in. He ducked under the first burst of gunfire, closing the distance before the soldiers could adjust their aim. His fist connected with the first soldier's solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. In the same fluid motion, Keith disarmed the second, using the soldier's own weapon to incapacitate him. The third soldier managed to fire off a shot, the energy bolt grazing Keith's shoulder. Keith hissed in pain but pushed through it, tackling the soldier and pinning him to the ground. "Keith!" Cora's voice called out. She appeared at the end of the corridor, her hands glowing with bioenergy. With a series of precise gestures, she activated hidden panels in the walls, sealing off several passages and trapping the remaining Tel forces. As Keith and Cora fought side by side, their movements synchronized with an almost preternatural harmony. They anticipated each other's actions, covering blind spots and creating openings for devastating counterattacks. Suddenly, the entire city shuddered. The crystal-like material of the walls vibrated at an unnatural frequency, small cracks appearing in the previously flawless surface. "Sonic weapons," Cora gasped, her face pale. "They're trying to destabilize the city's structure." Water began to seep through the cracks, a trickle quickly becoming a stream. Alarms blared throughout the lower levels, warning of imminent flooding. In the command center, Dr. Lyra made a grim decision. Her hands moved across the control panel, initiating a complex sequence of commands. "I'm activating the genetic manipulation device," she announced, her voice tight with tension. "It's our only chance to end this." Keith and Cora exchanged a look of understanding. They both knew what had to be done. "I'll do it," Keith said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "If there's a chance it can save the city and stop this war, I have to try." Cora grabbed his arm, her eyes searching his face. "Keith, you don't have to do this. The risks dash." He cut her off gently, placing his hand over hers. "I know, but this is bigger than just me. It's about the future of both our peoples." As they made their way to the chamber housing the genetic manipulation device, the sounds of battle grew more intense. Zarn and his team fought desperately to hold off the Tel forces, but it was clear they were outnumbered and outgunned. The chamber door slid open, revealing a massive apparatus humming with barely held back energy. Dr. Lyra stood at the controls, her face etched with concern. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as Keith approached the device. He nodded, his purpose unwavering. "What do I need to do?" As Dr. Lyra explained the procedure, Cora moved to Keith's side. Her hand found his, their fingers intertwining. "Come back to me," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Keith squeezed her hand, trying to convey everything he couldn't put into words. Then, taking a deep breath, he stepped into the chamber. As the device powered up, arcs of energy danced across its surface. Keith felt a tingling sensation spread throughout his body, growing in intensity until it became almost unbearable. Outside the chamber, alarms blared as the Tel forces pushed deeper into the city. The fate of the hidden Elysian metropolis, the revolutionary technology it contained, and the future of human-Elysian relations now rested on Keith's shoulders. As the genetic manipulation process began in earnest, Keith's world exploded into blinding light and searing pain. His last conscious thought was of Cora's face, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. Hope! The world faded to black as the genetic manipulation device engulfed him in a cocoon of pulsating energy. Keith's body convulsed as the transformation began. Every cell in his being felt like it was on fire, his DNA twisting and reconfiguring to integrate the Elysian genetic sequences. He bit back screams, his muscles spasming uncontrollably as waves of agony washed over him. Outside the chamber, Dr. Lyra's fingers danced across holographic displays, her brow furrowed in concentration as she monitored Keith's vital signs. The readings fluctuated wildly, spiking dangerously before plummeting to near-critical levels. "His body is rejecting the changes," Dr. Lyra muttered, her voice tight with concern. Cora stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Keith's writhing form. Without hesitation, she placed her hands on the chamber's crystalline surface. A soft blue glow emanated from her palms, seeping into the energy field surrounding Keith. "What are you doing?" Dr. Lyra asked, alarmed. "Helping," Cora replied, her voice strained with effort. She closed her eyes, focusing her innate connection to Elysian technology on stabilizing the genetic manipulation process. Keith's pain-racked mind latched onto Cora's presence. Her energy flowed through him, a soothing balm amidst the chaos of his transformation. His body slowly began to adapt, accepting the changes rather than fighting against them. As the procedure neared completion, Keith's body suddenly went rigid. A blinding flash of light erupted from within the chamber, forcing Cora and Dr. Lyra to shield their eyes. When they looked back, they saw Keith floating in the center of the device, his body radiating pulses of energy that interface with the city systems. Holographic displays throughout the lab flickered to life, showing real-time data from across the hidden metropolis. Keith's consciousness expanded, touching every corner of the vast underwater city. He sensed the damage caused by the Tel's assault, feeling the strain on the energy shield as if it were his own skin. With a thought, Keith diverted power to reinforce weakened sections of the shield. He rerouted coolant to overheating systems and initiated self-repair protocols in damaged structures. The city responded to his commands instantly, as if it were an extension of his own body. Alarms blared as a new threat emerged. Keith's enhanced senses picked up the approach of a small, heavily armed team led by Commander Vance. Their intentions radiated like a beacon in Keith's mind. They were after the genetic manipulation device. The chamber hissed open and Keith stepped out. His skin shimmered with a subtle iridescence, and his eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. Cora gasped, momentarily taken aback by his altered appearance. Keith turned to her, his expression softening. "It's still me," he said, his voice carrying a new resonance. Cora nodded, relief washing over her features. "I know," she replied, reaching out to touch his hand. The contact sent a jolt of energy between them, their connection stronger than ever. Dr. Lyra approached, her eyes wide with amazement. "The procedure was a success beyond our wildest expectations," she said. "You now possess the full adaptive capabilities of an Elysian, along with a unique ability to interface with our technology. You're the bridge between our species, Keith." Before Keith could fully process the implications of his transformation, the lab security systems flashed red. "Vance," Keith growled, his enhanced senses picking up the TL commander's approach. "Go," Dr. Lyra urged. "We'll coordinate the defense from here." Keith nodded, his mind already reaching out to the city systems. He sprinted from the lab, his movements fluid and precise. Corridors reconfigured themselves as he ran, creating the most direct path to intercept Vance's team. As he neared their position, Keith encountered the first wave of Tel soldiers. Energy bolts sizzled past him as he dove for cover. With a thought, he sealed blast doors behind the soldiers, cutting off their retreat. Keith's enhanced reflexes allowed him to dodge incoming fire with ease. He closed the distance to the nearest soldier, disarming him with a swift strike, before using the man's own weapon to incapacitate two more. Through his connection to the city, Keith sensed Cora coordinating with Zarn and the Elysian defenders. He fed her real-time information about the TL forces' positions, allowing the Elysians to mount an effective counteroffensive. As Keith fought his way closer to Vance, he became aware of a startling discovery made by Dr. Lyra. The genetic manipulation device could potentially grant similar abilities to other humans, but only those with a specific genetic marker, a marker present in humans who had prolonged close contact with Elysians. The implications raced through Keith's mind as he engaged another group of Tel soldiers. This technology could be the key to ending the conflict between humans and Elysians, ushering in an era of cooperation and advancement for both species. But first, he had to stop Vance. Keith rounded a corner and came face to face with the Tel commander. Vance's eyes widened in shock at Keith's transformed appearance. "What have they done to you?" Vance snarled, raising his weapon. Keith's hand shot out, his mind interfacing with Vance's gun. The weapon powered down, rendered useless. "They've shown me the truth," Keith replied, his voice steady. "This war ends now, Vance. It's time for humanity to evolve beyond fear and hatred." Vance's face contorted with rage as he lunged at Keith, a hidden blade glinting in his hand. Keith sidestepped the attack, his enhanced reflexes making Vance's movements seem slow and predictable. As they grappled, Keith became acutely aware of the weight of the moment. The outcome of this confrontation would shape the future of human-Elysian relations. With his new powers and the fate of two species hanging in the balance, Keith steeled himself for the fight that would determine the course of history. History. With lightning-fast reflexes, Keith caught Vance's wrist mid-strike, twisting it to force the blade from his grip. The commander grunted in pain but refused to yield, his free hand reaching for a secondary weapon. Keith's mind raced, processing the layout of the city through his newfound connection to its systems. He identified a large chamber near the city's core, where the genetic manipulation device's energy field was strongest. In a split-second decision, he released Vance's wrist and propelled himself backward, creating distance between them. "You want to finish this, Vance?" "Follow me," Keith challenged, his voice resonating with a new timbre that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the corridor. Without waiting for a response, Keith took off at inhuman speed, his body moving with fluid grace through the twisting passageways. He heard Vance's heavy footfalls behind him, the commander's labored breathing a stark contrast to Keith's effortless pace. As they ran, Keith's mind reached out to the city systems. Holographic barriers sprang to life, separating Vance from his remaining soldiers. Automated defense turrets emerged from hidden compartments, forcing the Tel troops to seek cover and preventing them from following their leader. Through his mental link, Keith coordinated with Cora and Zarn. "I'm leading Vance to the central chamber," he communicated. "Zarn, can you and your team handle the remaining Tel forces?" Zarn's response came swiftly. Affirmative. We're engaging now. Good hunting, Keith. Keith burst into the vast central chamber, its crystalline walls pulsing with energy. He quickly sealed all exits, ensuring his confrontation with Vance would be uninterrupted. Moments later, the TEL commander entered, his face flushed with exertion and scarcely controlled rage. Vance's eyes widened as he took in Keith's transformed appearance. "What have you become?" he snarled, activating a personal energy shield that hummed to life around him. "The future," Keith replied, his body tensing for the impending clash. "A bridge between our species. This war doesn't have to continue, Vance. We can end it here, peacefully." The commander's response was a barrage of high-energy plasma bolts from his weapon. Keith's enhanced reflexes allowed him to dodge with ease, his body moving faster than any normal human could track. He retaliated by manipulating the chamber's gravitational field, causing Vance to stumble and struggle for balance. As the battle intensified, Keith discovered he could create solid energy constructs with a mere thought. He formed a shield to deflect Vance's relentless attacks and crafted a series of energy projectiles to keep the TEL commander on the defensive. Realizing he was outmatched in direct combat, Vance changed tactics. He activated a device on his belt, and immediately the chamber's energy field began to fluctuate wildly. Keith felt a disturbance through his connection to the city, sensing the potential for catastrophic failure if the interference continued. "You're endangering everyone in the city, including your own men," Keith shouted, dividing his attention between combat and stabilizing the city systems. Vance sneered. "A necessary sacrifice to secure our future against the alien threat." Their battle raged on, the chamber becoming a kaleidoscope of energy fields and plasma discharges. Keith pushed his new abilities to their limit, creating increasingly complex energy constructs to counter Vance's every move. Suddenly, Keith felt Cora's presence in his mind. "Keith, we've found a way to neutralize the TEL forces without harming them." Her voice echoed in his thoughts. "But we need you back at the genetic manipulation device. You're the only one who can act as a conduit for its effects." Understanding the urgency, Keith redoubled his efforts to subdue Vance. He created a series of energy barriers, each designed to nullify the commander's weapons and defenses. Vance found himself increasingly cornered, his options dwindling with each passing second. In a final, desperate move, Vance overloaded his energy shield. The resulting explosion rocked the entire chamber, but Keith's enhanced reflexes allowed him to create a protective bubble around himself just in time. As the smoke cleared, he found Vance unconscious and severely injured on the chamber floor. Keith swiftly secured the TEL commander, using his control over Legion technology to create unbreakable restraints. He then reached out to Cora and Dr. Lyra. "Vance is down. I'm on my way back." As Keith raced through the city, he encountered pockets of resistance from the remaining TEL forces. He used his new abilities to quickly incapacitate these soldiers without causing serious harm, clearing a path back to the genetic manipulation device. The sounds of battle grew fainter as Keith approached the device chamber. He burst through the doors to find Cora and Dr. Lyra working feverishly at the controls. The massive apparatus hummed with terrifying power, ready to unleash its potential across the city. Cora looked up, relief washing over her face at the sight of Keith. "You made it," she breathed, her eyes scanning him for injuries. "Just in time, it seems," Keith replied, moving quickly to the center of the chamber. "What do you need me to do?" Dr. Lyra's fingers danced across holographic displays as she explained. "We've reconfigured the device to emit a field that will temporarily suppress aggression in the TEL forces. It should make them more open to peaceful negotiation. But we need you to act as a conduit for the energy. Your unique physiology is the key to making this work." Keith nodded, his face set with dedication. "Let's do this." As he stepped onto the platform at the heart of the device, Keith felt the weight of the moment. The outcome of this action could change the course of human-Elysian relations forever. The device powered up, energy arcing across its surface and enveloping Keith in a cocoon of pulsating light. Keith closed his eyes, focusing on channeling the energy through his transformed body. He felt it building within him, a tide of power unlike anything he had experienced before. As the energy reached its peak, Keith opened his eyes, ready to unleash the field that could end the conflict and usher in a new era of peace. Cooperation and usher in a new era of understanding between humans and Elysians. With a deep breath, Keith nodded to Dr. Lyra and Cora. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. As Keith stepped onto the circular platform at the center of the chamber, the device hummed to life. Crystalline structures pulsed with an otherworldly glow, casting dancing shadows across the room. The air crackled with energy, and Keith felt every hair on his body stand on end. Dr. Lyra's fingers flew across holographic displays, making final adjustments. "The device is primed," she announced, her voice taut with concentration. "We're initiating the sequence now." Keith closed his eyes, bracing himself for what was to come. Suddenly, a cocoon of swirling energy enveloped him, lifting him inches off the platform. His eyes snapped open, glowing with an intense blue-white light. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It felt as if every atom in his body was vibrating, resonating with the energy field. His mind expanded, connecting with the city's systems in ways he hadn't thought possible. He could sense every corridor, every room, every living being within the Elysian stronghold. Through this expanded awareness, Keith became acutely conscious of the battle raging outside. He could feel the positions of both Elysian defenders and tel-attackers, their movements as clear to him as if they were extensions of his own body. Alarms blared throughout the city, their urgent wails cutting to the hum of the device. Zarn's voice crackled over the communication system, tension evident in his tone. "We can't hold out much longer against their advanced weaponry. We need that device operational now." Keith's mind raced, processing the information flooding his senses. With a thought, he began coordinating the city's defenses, sealing off vulnerable areas and rerouting power to critical systems. Holographic barriers sprang to life, deflecting enemy fire and protecting Elysian defenders. As the genetic manipulation device reached full power, Keith felt an immense surge course through his body. He gritted his teeth, channeling the energy outward. A wave of blue-white light pulsed from the chamber, spreading throughout the city and beyond. The effect on the Tel forces was immediate and dramatic. Across the city, soldiers lowered their weapons, aggression draining from their faces. Some looked disoriented, while others seemed to experience a moment of profound clarity. Keith watched through the city's sensors as Tel troops began questioning their actions, looking at their weapons as if seeing them for the first time. Elysian defenders, unaffected by the energy field, moved swiftly to secure the now docile invaders. But the strain on Keith's body was immense. His muscles spasmed, and his skin crackled with excess energy. Sweat poured down his face as he struggled to maintain control over the massive power flowing through him. Cora, monitoring his vital signs, called out in alarm. "His cellular structure is destabilizing. We need to shut it down." Dr. Lyra shook her head, her eyes fixed on the data streaming across her displays. "We can't stop now. We need to expand the field to reach the Tel ships in orbit. It's our only chance to end this conflict completely." As Dr. Lyra increased the power output, Keith felt his body begin to lose cohesion. His form blurred, hybrid DNA unable to cope with the enormous energies coursing through him. He cried out in pain, his voice distorting. Cora, acting on instinct, rushed towards the platform. "Keith," she shouted, ignoring Dr. Lyra's warnings about the dangers of interrupting the process. As Cora entered the energy field surrounding Keith, a brilliant flash of light engulfed them both. the chamber filled with a blinding radiance, forcing Dr. Lyra to shield her eyes. When the light faded, Keith found himself standing hand in hand with Cora. Their bodies glowed with a soft, pulsating light, perfectly in sync. He could feel her presence not just physically but mentally. Their minds intertwined, sharing the burden of channeling the device's immense power. With their combined strength, the genetic manipulation field expanded its reach. It enveloped not just the city but stretched outward, encompassing the entire Tel fleet in orbit. Keith and Cora stood at the heart of the energy vortex, their eyes closed in concentration. Through their shared consciousness, they guided the field, ensuring it reached every Tel soldier and crew member. As the energy field reached its maximum extent, Keith felt his strength waning. Beside him, Cora trembled with exhaustion. They had pushed themselves to the very limit of their endurance. Just as Keith thought he couldn't hold on any longer, the energy field stabilized. The device powered down, its job complete. Keith and Cora collapsed to the platform, unconscious but still hand in hand. Dr. Lyra rushed to their side, checking their vital signs. "They're alive," she announced, relief evident in her voice. "But they've experienced significant cellular stress. We need to get them to advanced medical facilities immediately." As medical teams arrived to tend to Keith and Cora, reports began flooding in from across the city and orbital sensors. The TL forces, both on the ground and in their ships, had ceased all hostile actions. Many were requesting to open diplomatic channels, their aggression replaced by a desire for peaceful resolution. Zarn burst into the chamber, his eyes widening at the sight of his sister unconscious alongside Keith. Despite his usual reservations, he couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for their shared sacrifice. As Keith and Cora were carefully moved onto stretchers, Dr. Lyra turned to her displays, analyzing the data from the genetic manipulation process. The immediate crisis had been averted, but many questions remained unanswered. How long would the effects of the genetic manipulation last? What unforeseen consequences might arise from this unprecedented melding of human and Elysian biology? And perhaps most importantly, how would this event reshape the future of human-Elysian relations? As the medical team rushed Keith and Cora to the city's most advanced treatment facilities, the leaders of both species prepared to enter a new era of diplomacy and potential cooperation. The stage was set for complex negotiations and the exploration of a shared future, with Keith and Cora's unique bond at the center of this new paradigm. In the medical bay, machines hummed and beeped, monitoring the vital signs of the two heroes who had risked everything to bring peace. As Keith and Cora lay side by side, their hands still intertwined, a faint glow pulsed between them, a visible manifestation of the bond they now shared. A soft, pulsating light emanated from their intertwined fingers, a visible manifestation of the extraordinary bond they now shared. As the medical team rushed Keith and Cora through the corridors of the Elysian Medical Facility, Dr. Lyra hurried alongside, her eyes fixed on the holographic displays, monitoring their vital signs. The readings were unlike anything she had ever seen before, fluctuating in perfect synchronization between the two patients. "Prepare the advanced regeneration chamber," Dr. Lyra called out to her team as they entered the main treatment area. "We need to stabilize their cellular structure immediately." The room buzzed with activity as Elysian medical staff maneuvered the stretchers into position. With practiced precision, they transferred Keith and Cora into a large, cylindrical chamber filled with a translucent, gel-like substance. As the chamber sealed shut, Dr. Lyra activated the controls, initiating the healing process. Days passed, and Keith and Cora remained unconscious, suspended in the regeneration chamber. Dr. Lyra and her team worked tirelessly, analyzing the unprecedented melding of human and Elysian biology that had occurred during the activation of the genetic manipulation device. Their cellular structures have become intertwined on a fundamental level. Dr. Lyra explained to Zarn, who had come to check on his sister's progress. It's created a symbiotic relationship that's enhancing both of their natural abilities. Zarn's brow furrowed as he watched the pulsating light that still connected Keith and Cora. And what does this mean for their future? For our future? Dr. Lyra shook her head, her expression a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. That remains to be seen, but one thing is clear. This bond between them is something entirely new. As Keith and Cora's bodies regenerated at an accelerated rate, the world outside the medical facility was in a state of flux. The affected Tel forces, their aggression suppressed by the genetic manipulation field, had begun engaging in peaceful negotiations with Elysian representatives. Zarn, despite his lingering wariness of humans, found himself taking a leading role in these discussions. He stood before a group of Tel officers, their faces no longer twisted with hostility, but instead showing confusion and a desire for understanding. "We have all been changed by recent events," Zarn began, his voice steady and measured. "But perhaps this change offers us an opportunity, a chance to forge a new path together, one of cooperation rather than conflict." As the negotiations progressed, Dr. Lyra made a startling discovery. The effects of the genetic manipulation field on the Tel soldiers were temporary, estimated to last only a few weeks. This revelation added a sense of urgency to the peace talks, as both sides recognized the need to establish a lasting agreement before the effects wore off. In orbit around the planet, the Tel fleet remained in a holding pattern, their crews still under the influence of the field. Earth governments, alerted to the situation, dispatched diplomatic envoys to assess the situation and participate in the ongoing negotiations. Back in the medical facility, Keith and Cora's vital signs began to stabilize. Their brain waves, which had been mirroring each other's patterns, started to show signs of individual activity. Dr. Lyra watched the monitors intently, her excitement growing as she realized her patients were finally regaining consciousness. Keith's eyes fluttered open first, followed moments later by Cora's. As their gazes met, a flood of shared memories and sensations washed over them. Keith found himself understanding the intricate nuances of the Elysian language, while Cora's mind filled with vivid images of Earth's history and culture. What happened? Keith's voice was hoarse from disuse, but his words came out in perfect Elysian. Cora's eyes widened in surprise. "You're speaking my language," she replied in equally flawless English. Dr. Lyra approached the regeneration chamber, her face a mix of relief and fascination. "Welcome back," she said, deactivating the chamber and helping them sit up. "You've been unconscious for several days. Your bodies have undergone significant changes." As Dr. Lyra explained the situation, Keith and Cora listened intently, their hands still clasped together. They learned of the ongoing peace negotiations and the temporary nature of the genetic manipulation field's effects on the Tel forces. "We need to be part of those talks," Keith said, attempting to stand but finding his legs unsteady. Dr. Lyra gently pushed him back down. "I understand your eagerness, but your hybrid physiology is still stabilizing. Any stress could trigger unpredictable changes. For now, you both need to remain under observation." Frustration flashed across Keith and Cora's faces, but then their expressions changed simultaneously, as if they'd just shared a private joke. They looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. "We may not be able to attend in person," Cora said, a small smile playing on her lips, "but I think we've found another way to contribute." Keith nodded, completing her thought. "We can communicate telepathically. We can share our insights with the negotiation teams from here." Dr. Lyra's eyes widened at this revelation. "Fascinating. This could be invaluable to the peace process. I'll inform Zarn and the other negotiators immediately." As Keith and Cora recovered, their unique abilities continued to develop. Keith found his problem-solving skills enhanced by Elysian intuition, allowing him to propose innovative solutions to long-standing issues between the two species. Cora's natural affinity for Elysian technology was augmented by human creativity, enabling her to develop new applications for their advanced systems. Their presence, even from afar, had a profound impact on the peace talks. Negotiators on both sides began to see the possibility of a future where humans and Elysians worked together, combining their strengths to achieve greatness. Finally, after weeks of recovery and observation, Dr. Lyra cleared Keith and Cora to leave the medical facility. As they stood at the threshold, hand in hand, the breathtaking expanse of the hidden Elysian city spread out before them. Keith squeezed Cora's hand, feeling the familiar pulse of energy between them. "Ready?" he asked, his voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. Cora nodded, her eyes shining with willpower. "Together," she replied. They stepped out into the city, ready to take an active role in shaping the future of human-Elysian relations. As they walked, the soft glow of their intertwined hands caught the attention of passing Elysians, a visible symbol of the new era that was dawning. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities they could scarcely imagine. But as Keith and Cora moved through the city, their steps in perfect unison, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it as one. Their shared experiences had forged an unbreakable bond, a connection that transcended mere physical attraction or emotional attachment. It was a melding of minds, bodies, and spirits that would shape the future of both their species. As they stepped out of the medical facility, the bustling city stretched before them, a marvel of Elysian architecture and technology. Crystalline spires reached towards the sky, their surfaces shimmering with an otherworldly iridescence. The streets teemed with Elysians going about their daily lives, but as Keith and Cora emerged, a hush fell over the crowd. Eyes widened and conversations halted as the Elysians caught sight of the human-Elysian pair. The soft glow emanating from Keith and Cora's joined hands drew particular attention, a visible manifestation of their unique bond. Dr. Lyra, who had accompanied them, quickly found herself surrounded by curious officials and medical personnel. She launched into a detailed explanation of Keith and Cora's condition, her words spreading rapidly through the gathered crowd. "Their cellular structures have been fundamentally altered," Dr. Lyra explained, gesturing to the holographic display she had brought with her. "We're seeing a level of human-Elysian integration that was previously thought impossible." As the news spread, murmurs of excitement and concern rippled through the onlookers. Keith and Cora exchanged a glance, their mental link allowing them to share their mixed feelings of anticipation and nervousness. "We need to get to the central government building," Keith said, his words coming out in perfect Elysian. "The peace talks dash." "Can't wait," Cora finished his sentence, nodding in agreement. They made their way through the parting crowd, the Elysians giving them a wide berth out of a mixture of respect and uncertainty. As they walked, Keith marveled at how easily he navigated the city, Cora's knowledge of its layout now seamlessly integrated into his own mind. The central government building loomed ahead, a massive structure that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Its crystalline walls pulsed with energy, the building itself appearing almost alive. As they entered, they were immediately struck by the tense atmosphere. In the main chamber, they found Zarn locked in a heated discussion with human diplomatic envoys. The argument came to an abrupt halt as Keith and Cora walked in, all eyes turning to the pair. Zarn's face showed a complex mix of emotions, relief at seeing his sister recovered, lingering wariness towards Keith, and a grudging respect for what they had accomplished together. "Keith, Cora," he said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. "Your timing is impeccable. We've reached an impasse in the negotiations." Keith stepped forward, his enhanced problem-solving skills already kicking into gear. "What seems to be the main point of contention?" he asked, his gaze sweeping across the assembled diplomats. A stern-faced Elysian official, whom Keith's newly acquired knowledge identified as Vex, spoke up. The humans are demanding unrestricted access to our technology. We cannot allow our most advanced systems to fall into unprepared hands. Keith nodded, processing the information. He could feel Cora's thoughts intertwining with his own, her intimate understanding of Elysian technology blending with his diplomatic experience. What if we proposed a phased approach? Keith suggested, the idea forming as he spoke. We could establish a framework for sharing specific technologies based on demonstrated responsible use and mutual benefit. The room fell silent as both humans and Elysians considered the proposal. Keith could see the gears turning in their minds, the potential implications unfolding. Vex's stern expression softened slightly. That could be workable, he admitted. But the details would need to be carefully negotiated. Of course, Cora chimed in, her voice carrying the weight of her Elysian heritage. We could establish joint committees to oversee each phase of technology transfer, ensuring that both species' interests are protected. The tension in the room noticeably eased as the diplomats on both sides began to see a path forward. Zarn looked at Keith and Cora with newfound respect, recognizing the unique value their combined perspective brought to the negotiations. As discussions resumed with renewed energy, Keith and Cora found themselves at the center of attention. Their ability to bridge the gap between human and Elysian viewpoints proved invaluable, allowing them to address concerns from both sides with nuanced understanding. Hours passed as they delved into the intricacies of the proposed technology-sharing framework. Keith's enhanced problem-solving abilities allowed him to foresee potential issues and propose solutions before they became sticking points. Cora's intuitive grasp of Elysian systems enabled her to explain complex concepts in terms the human diplomats could understand. As the session wound down for the day, there was a palpable sense of progress. The first major breakthrough in the peace talks had been achieved, largely thanks to Keith and Cora's unique insights. As they left the government building, exhausted but satisfied, Keith and Cora noticed something unexpected. A group of young Elysians had gathered outside, their appearance striking in its blend of human and Elysian elements. Some had attempted to recreate the glow of Keith and Cora's joined hands using bioluminescent paint, while others had adopted aspects of human fashion. It seems we've started a trend, Cora said, a mix of amusement and wonder in her voice. Keith nodded, feeling the weight of their influence settling on his shoulders. Let's hope it's a trend towards understanding and cooperation. As they made their way back to their temporary quarters, Keith and Cora knew that this was just the beginning. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but they faced it together, their bond a beacon of hope for a new era of human-Elysian relations. As they walked through the city, their minds turned to the challenges that lay ahead in the ongoing peace negotiations. The following days saw Keith and Cora deeply immersed in the intricacies of human-Elysian diplomacy. Their unique perspective proved invaluable as they worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between the two species. During a particularly heated session, Keith proposed an idea that would become the cornerstone of their efforts. What if we establish a program for permanent ambassadors? He suggested, his voice carrying the weight of both human diplomacy and Elysian intuition. Individuals from both species who undergo the same process we did, creating a core of hybrid mediators who truly understand both sides. The proposal sparked intense debate among the negotiators. Some saw it as a bold step towards lasting peace, while others expressed concerns about the potential risks and ethical implications. Cora, sensing the growing tension, stepped forward. "We understand your reservations," she said, her words resonating with empathy. "That's why we propose a series of public demonstrations to showcase the benefits of our hybrid state." Over the next week, Keith and Cora organized and participated in a range of events designed to illustrate the potential of human-Elysian integration. They interface with complex Elysian systems, their hybrid physiology allowing them to access and manipulate technology in ways that amaze both humans and Elysians alike. During one such demonstration in the central plaza of the hidden city, Keith and Cora approached an ancient Elysian artifact that had long puzzled researchers. The artifact, a sphere of swirling energy, had resisted all attempt at activation. As they stood before it, their hands clasped, Keith felt a familiar surge of energy. "Are you feeling this?" he asked Cora, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the sphere. "It's like it's calling to us." Together, they reached out and touched the artifact. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The sphere pulsed with brilliant light, and a holographic map of the galaxy burst into existence above it. The crowd gasped in awe as the map revealed dozens of glowing points scattered across the stars. "Those are Elysian outposts," Cora breathed, her enhanced knowledge allowing her to interpret the map. "Colonies and research stations. Far more than we knew existed." The revelation sent shockwaves through both the human and Elysian communities. The scope of potential cooperation and shared exploration suddenly expanded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. It also brought a new urgency to the peace talks, as leaders on both sides recognized the potential for conflict if these locations were discovered independently by human exploration teams. As debates raged on, Dr. Lyra made a breakthrough in her ongoing study of Keith and Cora's physiology. She burst into a negotiation session, her eyes bright with excitement. "I've found something remarkable," she announced, pulling up a holographic display. "The hybrid state has activated dormant genetic sequences present in both human and Elysian DNA. This suggests a possible ancient connection between our species." The revelation added fuel to the arguments for closer cooperation and integration. However, not everyone was convinced. Opposition to the peace process grew more vocal and organized. Outside the government building, a crowd of Elysian traditionalists gathered, led by Krell, a charismatic and outspoken opponent of human-Elysian relations. "We demand an immediate end to these talks," Krell shouted, his voice carrying over the din of the protesters. "All humans must be expelled from our territory." Inside, the negotiators received troubling reports from Earth. Anti-alien sentiment was on the rise, with some factions calling for preemptive strikes against the Elysians. As tensions reached a boiling point, Keith and Cora's enhanced senses picked up on an imminent threat. A group of human extremists, having infiltrated the Tel forces, was planning to sabotage the city's power core. Without hesitation, Keith and Cora sprang into action. They raced through the city's winding streets, their hybrid physiology allowing them to move with superhuman speed and agility. They plunged into the complex network of tunnels beneath the city, navigating the labyrinthine passages with their shared knowledge of Elysian infrastructure. As they approached the power core, they heard the sounds of a struggle. They burst into the chamber to find the saboteurs already at work, their hands flying over alien control panels. Keith and Cora moved as one, their movements perfectly synchronized. They engaged the extremists in a fierce physical confrontation, their enhanced strength and reflexes giving them the upper hand. One by one, they subdued the attackers. But victory came at a cost. In the chaos of the fight, one of the saboteurs managed to activate a device designed to overload the power core. Alarms blared as the core's energy output began to spike dangerously. "If it goes critical, it'll destroy the entire city," Cora said, her voice tight with urgency. Keith nodded, already moving towards the core's main control interface. "We have to stabilize it manually." They placed their hands on the pulsing surface of the core, wincing as raw energy coursed through their bodies. Their hybrid physiology allowed them to withstand the onslaught, but they knew they couldn't hold out forever. Working in perfect unison, they interfaced directly with the core systems. Their minds merged with the alien technology, racing to counter the saboteur's virus and stabilize the energy flow. The chamber filled with blinding light as the core's output reached critical levels. Just when it seemed the core would breach, Keith and Cora found the key. With a final push of their combined will, they rerouted the excess energy, dispersing it safely through the city's power grid. The alarms fell silent, and the core's glow returned to its normal, steady pulse. Exhausted but triumphant, Keith and Cora stumbled out of the chamber to find a crowd of humans and Elysians waiting. Word of their actions had spread quickly, and the near disaster had served as a wake-up call for both species. Zarn pushed his way through the crowd, his face a mix of relief and newfound respect. "You saved us all," he said, looking at Keith and Cora with wonder. "Your actions today prove that we are stronger together than apart." As the implications of the foiled attack sank in, support for Keith and Cora's permanent ambassador program grew. Leaders on both sides recognized the need for individuals capable of bridging the gap between their species. Days later, as final preparations were made for the first group of volunteer ambassadors to undergo the hybridization process, a new threat emerged. Long-range sensors detected an unidentified fleet of ships approaching the Elysian system. Keith and Cora stood with the human and Elysian leaders, watching the holographic display of the incoming vessels with growing concern. "Those aren't human designs," Keith said, his brow furrowed. Cora shook her head. "And they're like no Elysian ships I've ever seen." As the unknown fleet drew closer, Keith and Cora exchanged a look. They knew that the fragile piece they had worked so hard to build now faced its greatest test. The future of human-Elysian relations hung in the balance, and they would need every ounce of their combined strength and wisdom to face this new challenge. As the fleet drew closer, the atmosphere in the command center grew tense. Keith and Cora exchanged a determined look, their hands clasped tightly together. "We need to act fast," Keith said, his mind already racing with possibilities. Cora nodded, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with increased intensity. "Let's see what we can do with the early warning systems." Without hesitation, they approached the nearest Elysian control panel. Their hands moved in perfect synchronization, fingers dancing across the alien interface. As they connected with the technology, their hybrid physiology allowed them to process and manipulate data at an unprecedented speed. "We're boosting the sensor range," Cora announced, her voice tight with concentration. Keith's enhanced mind quickly grasped the intricacies of the system. "I'm recalibrating the detection algorithms to account for unknown ship configurations." Their efforts paid off almost immediately. The holographic display flickered and expanded, revealing a clearer picture of the approaching fleet. The extra time they had bought would be crucial for organizing a proper response. As they worked, Dr. Lyra burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement. "You need to see this," she said, pulling up her own data on a nearby screen. "I've been analyzing the readings from the approaching ships and, well, look for yourselves." Keith and Cora stepped back from the control panel, their eyes widening as they took in the information. The ship's energy signatures contained unmistakable traces of both human and Elysian technology. "How is this possible?" Keith murmured, his mind racing to connect the dots. Cora gasped softly. The artifact. The map of Elysian outposts. Could these ships be from one of those colonies? The implications of this discovery sent a ripple of murmurs through the assembled leaders. The nature of the approaching fleet had suddenly become far more complex. Keith turned to Cora, an idea forming in his mind. "We need to make contact with them before they reach the system. If they have both human and Elysian origins, we might be the best equipped to communicate with them." Cora nodded, understanding immediately. The Elysian scout ships. They're fast, stealthy, and we can interface with them directly. They presented their plan to the gathered leaders, who agreed with reluctance. The risk was high, but the potential benefits of peaceful first contact outweighed the dangers. Over the next few hours, Keith and Cora underwent intensive training in the scout ship systems. The cockpit was cramped, forcing them into close physical proximity as they practiced maneuvers and emergency procedures. Their bodies pressed together, heightening the ever-present connection between them. As Keith reached across Cora to adjust the control, he felt a surge of energy pass between them. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the impending mission faded away. The air crackled with tension, their enhanced physiologies hyper-aware of each other's presence. Cora broke the silence, her voice husky. "We should prepare for the bonding ceremony. It's tradition before a mission of this importance." The Elysian bonding ceremony took place in a quiet chamber, lit by soft bioluminescent light. Keith and Cora stood facing each other, their hearts racing with anticipation. An Elysian elder guided them through the ritual, explaining the significance of each step. With steady hands, they began to apply the glowing markings to each other's skin. Keith traced intricate patterns across Cora's arms and shoulders, marveling at the way the bioluminescent liquid seemed to come alive at his touch. Cora, in turn, decorated Keith's chest and face with swirling designs that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. The intimate act deepened their connection, both physically and mentally. As the ceremony concluded, they felt more in tune with each other than ever before. With final preparations complete, Keith and Cora boarded their scout ship. The launch was smooth, the advanced Elysian technology responding to their slightest commands. As they left the safety of the planet behind, a tense silence fell over the cockpit. Their journey through the outer reaches of the Elysian system was fraught with challenges. Spatial anomalies threatened to throw them off course. But Keith's human intuition combined seamlessly with Cora's Elysian spatial awareness. Together, they navigated the treacherous region, their movements in perfect harmony. As they approached the edge of the system, the first ships of the mysterious fleet came into view. The design was unlike anything they had ever seen, a striking blend of human and Elysian aesthetics that confirmed Dr. Lyra's analysis. Keith took a deep breath. "Here goes nothing," he said, initiating the communication sequence they had prepared. For a tense moment, there was no response. Then, suddenly, a holographic projection materialized in their cockpit. The image coalesced into a figure that left them both stunned, a being that was clearly a human-Elysian hybrid, much like themselves. "Greetings," the figure said, its voice carrying a strange accent. "I am Admiral Zara of the Galactic Pioneers. We've come a long way to find you." Keith and Cora exchanged a look of amazement. Cora spoke first, her voice steady despite her shock. "We are Keith and Cora, representatives of the human and Elysian peoples. We've come to make peaceful contact and understand your intentions." Admiral Zara smiled, an expression that was somehow both familiar and alien. "We are the descendants of a joint human-Elysian expedition, lost to the stars centuries ago. We've returned to our ancestral home, seeking reunion with our original species." The revelation sent Keith and Cora reeling. Their own hybrid status, once unique, now seemed like a precursor to something much larger. "We have much to discuss," Admiral Zar continued. "Will you join us aboard our flagship?" Keith nodded, making the decision for both of them. "We would be honored." As they maneuvered their scout ship towards a massive galactic pioneer vessel, Keith and Cora felt the weight of history pressing down upon them. They were about to step into a situation that could reshape the future of both their species. The docking procedure was seamless, the advanced technology of the galactic pioneers guiding their small craft safely into the enormous ship. As the airlock cycled, Keith and Cora clasped hands, drawing strength from each other. The door slid open, revealing a corridor that defied their expectations. The interior of the ship was a marvel of bioengineering, with living walls that pulsed with energy and holographic displays that seemed to float in midair. As they followed their guide deeper into the vessel, they encountered other human-Elysian hybrids, each unique in their combination of traits. Finally, They arrived at a vast chamber filled with swirling holographic displays. Admiral Zara stood at the center, surrounded by her council. The holograms showed glimpses of distant worlds and incredible achievements, telling the story of the galactic pioneers' journey across the stars. As the doors closed behind them, Keith and Cora realized they stood at the threshold of a new chapter in the history of both their species. The fate of human-Elysian relations, and perhaps the future of their entire civilization, hung in the balance. Admiral Zara stepped forward, her expression a mix of warmth and gravity. "Welcome, Keith and Cora," she said, her voice echoing in the chamber. "We have much to discuss about our shared past and our potential future." Future? Keith and Cora stepped forward, their enhanced senses taking in every detail of the vast chamber. The holographic displays surrounding them told a story of incredible achievements and distant worlds, each image more breathtaking than the last. Admiral Zara's voice, rich with the accent of centuries spent far from known space, filled the room. "Our journey began generations ago, during a time when humans and Elysians first reached out to one another in friendship. A secret expedition was launched, seeking to explore the farthest reaches of the galaxy." As she spoke, the holograms shifted to show the launch of an immense ship, its design a clear fusion of human and Elysian technology. Keith and Cora exchanged glances, their minds racing with the implications of this revelation. "Over time," Zara continued, "our ancestors interbred, evolving into the society you see before you. We have combined the best traits of both species, creating something entirely new." The other council members watched Keith and Cora with undisguised fascination. One of them, a tall figure with striking bioluminescent patterns across his skin, stepped forward. "I am Dr. Vex," he said, holding up a sleek device. "With your permission, we like to study your hybrid physiology. Your unique transformation could provide valuable insights for our own population." Keith nodded, speaking for both of them. "Of course, we're here to learn from each other." Dr. Vex moved around them, the device emitting a soft hum as it scanned their bodies. The results appeared instantly on a nearby holographic display, causing a stir among the council members. "Extraordinary," Dr. Vex murmured, his eyes wide with excitement. "Your hybrid state is more advanced and stable than anything we've seen before. The circumstances of your transformation must have been truly unique." As the council members huddled around the display, Admiral Zara turned back to Keith and Cora, her expression growing serious. "There's more you need to know," she said. "Our long-range sensors detected growing tensions between humans and Elysians in our ancestral home system. We feared a conflict that could destroy both species, so we decided to intervene." Keith's mind raced with the potential implications. "The peace negotiations," he said, looking at Cora. "This could change everything." Cora nodded, already thinking ahead. "We need to establish communication with the leaders back on the planet. They need to know about this." Admiral Zara agreed, and within moments, a secure channel was opened to the planet's surface. As the leaders on both sides were briefed about the galactic pioneers, a mix of reactions played out on the holographic screens. Some faces lit up with hope, while others darkened with suspicion. Drawing on their unique position, Keith and Cora proposed a bold plan. "Invite a delegation from the planet to visit your ship," Keith suggested. "Let them see firsthand what human-Elysian cooperation can achieve." Admiral Zara's eyes sparkled with approval. "An excellent idea. We'll begin preparations immediately." As plans for the delegation's visit were set in motion, a young hybrid named Lyra stepped forward to give Keith and Cora a tour of the ship. They moved through corridors of living metal, marveling at the seamless integration of human and Elysian design. Lyra led them to a medical bay where doctors of both species worked side by side, using technologies that seemed decades beyond anything they had seen before. In the engineering section, Keith watched in awe as human and Elysian scientists collaborated on projects that defied his understanding. As they walked, Lyra spoke of the unique customs the pioneers had developed over the centuries. Our bonding rituals celebrate the diversity of our hybrid population, she explained. He knows our capabilities, and he has access to advanced human military tech. They exchanged a quick glance. Years of partnership allowing them to formulate a plan without speaking. Keith would focus on disabling the command ship's engines, while Cora would target its communication arrays to isolate Vance from the rest of the fleet. As they made their final approach, an enemy shot clipped their fighter. The cockpit erupted in a shower of sparks as the power surged, momentarily overwhelming their neural interfaces with the ship. For a fraction of a second, Keith and Cora's minds merged completely. Memories, thoughts, and emotions flowed between them in a torrent of shared consciousness. The experience left them gasping, their connection deeper than ever before. Recovering quickly, they pressed their attack. Keith's piloting was a masterclass in precision, weaving through the command ship's defensive fire as if he could see the shots before they were fired. Cora's targeting was equally impressive, her shots finding vulnerabilities in the enemy's defenses that no ordinary gunner could have exploited. In a matter of moments, the command ship's primary systems went dark. Its engines sputtered and died, while its communication arrays erupted in a series of small explosions. As the extremist fleet fell into disarray, Admiral Zar's voice came through once more, urgent and commanding. "Keith, Cora, Vance's ship is making a break for it. He may have critical information about our technology. You need to stop him." Without hesitation, they broke off their attack on the command ship and gave chase. Vance's vessel, sleek and fast, was already accelerating towards a nearby asteroid field. Keith pushed their fighter to its limits, the engines whining in protest as they closed the gap. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a chaotic maze of rocky debris that would challenge even the most skilled pilot. As they entered the field, the pursuit became a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. Vance demonstrated his own considerable skills, weaving between asteroids with reckless abandon. But Keith matched him move for move, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to navigate the treacherous terrain. Cora, meanwhile, focused on disabling Vance's engines. Her shots were precise, each one forcing Vance to adjust his course and slowing his escape. The chase intensified, with near misses and close calls increasing by the second. Asteroids whizzed by, some close enough to scrape the hull of their fighter. But Keith and Cora remained focused, their shared goal driving them forward. As they closed in on Vance's ship, a realization struck them both simultaneously. This wasn't just about ending a battle. It was about securing the future of human-Elysian relations. Capturing Vance could provide the key to understanding and dismantling the extremist movement. With this in mind, Keith made a split-second decision. Using the gravity of a massive asteroid, he slingshot their fighter directly into Vance's path. The maneuver was risky, pushing their craft to its structural limits, but it worked. Vance, caught off guard by their sudden appearance, was forced into a sharp turn. His ship clipped a smaller asteroid, sending it into an uncontrolled spin. Cora seized the moment, firing a precise shot that neutralized Vance's remaining engine power. The rogue commander's ship drifted helplessly in space, its threat neutralized. As Keith and Cora prepared to board and apprehend Vance, their comm system crackled to life. Admiral Zar's voice came through, her tone urgent. "Keith, Cora, excellent work. But we need you back at the flagship immediately. There's been a development that requires your unique expertise." Exchanging a puzzled glance, Keith and Cora secured Vance's ship with a tractor beam and set course for the Galactic Pioneer Fleet. As they flew, the adrenaline of battle began to fade, replaced by a growing curiosity about what new challenge awaited them. The battle might be over, but their adventure was far from finished. Whatever lay ahead, They would face it together, their bond stronger than ever. As they approached the flagship, Keith and Cora exchanged a look of anticipation, their minds racing with possibilities. The moment their shuttle touched down in the hangar bay, a team of security personnel rushed forward to secure Vance's disabled vessel. Keith and Cora barely had time to power down their systems before an urgent message came through their comms. "Report to the command center immediately." Admiral Zara's voice crackled, tension evident in her tone. They hurried through the corridors, their steps in perfect sync. The ship's crew moved aside, sensing the urgency of their mission. As the command center doors slid open, they were met with a scene of controlled chaos. Admiral Zara stood at the center of a holographic display, her face illuminated by the swirling data streams. She looked up as they entered, her expression a mix of relief and concern. "Keith, Cora, we have a situation," she said, gesturing them closer. During the battle, our long-range sensors detected a massive energy surge from the planet's surface. The holographic display shifted, showing a pulsating point of light on the planet below. Keith's eyes widened as he recognized the location. "That's where we activated the Elysian artifact," he said, his voice low. Cora leaned in, her bioluminescent markings flaring in response to the data. "The energy signature. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." Admiral Zara nodded grimly. "Our scientists are baffled. It matches no known human or Elysian technology. We need you two to lead a team back to the surface and investigate." As if on cue, Dr. Vex entered the command center, his arms laden with equipment. "I prepared some specialized gear for your mission," he said, setting down a case on a nearby console. The next hour was a whirlwind of preparation. Keith and Cora were fitted with advanced protective suits, their sleek design a testament to the fusion of human and Elysian technology. Dr. Vex walked them through the operation of the new sensor equipment, his words coming in a rapid-fire stream of technical jargon. As Dr. Vex made final adjustments to their suits, Keith found himself acutely aware of Cora's proximity. The close quarters required for the fitting seemed to heighten the connection between them, their hybrid physiology responding in ways that sent tingles along his spine. A low rumble shook the ship, causing everyone to look up in alarm. Admiral Zara's voice came over the intercom. "The energy surge is affecting the planet's weather patterns. Electrical storms are forming around the artifact site. You need to move out now." With a final nod to Admiral Zara, Keith, Cora, and Dr. Vex boarded a shuttle bound for the planet's surface. As they descended through the atmosphere, the true extent of the changes became apparent. The once clear skies were now roiling with dark clouds, shot through with veins of electric blue energy. Keith gripped the controls tightly, his enhanced reflexes pushed to their limits as he navigated through the turbulence. "Bank left," Cora called out, her Elysian intuition allowing her to sense safe paths through the storm. Keith complied without hesitation, narrowly avoiding a bolt of energy that crackled past their viewport. After a harrowing descent, they touched down in a clearing near the artifact site. As the shuttle's hatch opened, they were hit by a wall of humid air, thick with the scent of ozone and vegetation. "The plant life," Dr. Vex breathed, his eyes wide behind his protective visor. "It's grown exponentially. Where there had once been open fields, now stood a dense, almost jungle-like forest. Vines and creepers climbed impossibly tall trees, their leaves pulsing with an otherworldly bioluminescence. As they made their way through the transformed landscape, Keith's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of movement in the underbrush. He held up a hand, signaling the others to stop. A creature burst from the foliage, its form a twisted version of the native fauna they had encountered on their previous visit. It moved with unnatural speed and agility, its eyes glowing with the same energy that permeated the air. Without a word, Keith and Cora moved in unison. Keith positioned himself in front of Dr. Vex, while Cora's hands glowed with bioelectric energy. The creature lunged, But Cora was faster. A burst of energy from her palms sent it careening back into the underbrush. "Fascinating," Dr. Vex muttered, his sensors whirring. "The artifact's energy seems to have enhanced the local wildlife." They pressed on, encountering more altered creatures as they neared the artifact's chamber. Each time, Keith and Cora worked in seamless coordination to protect themselves and Dr. Vex. Finally, they reached the entrance to the chamber. The once smooth stone walls were now covered in a network of glowing veins, pulsing in time with the energy emanating from within. As they stepped inside, the full impact of the artifact's transformation hit them. The sphere that had once floated serenely was now a maelstrom of energy, its surface rippling with constantly shifting star maps and alien text. Dr. Vex immediately began setting up his equipment, his fingers flying over holographic interfaces as he attempted to make sense of the readings. Keith and Cora approached the artifact, drawn by an inexplicable pull. "We need to try an interface with it," Cora said, her voice barely audible over the hum of energy. Keith nodded, reaching out to take her hand. As their fingers intertwined, they felt the now familiar surge of their combined hybrid energy. Together, they reached out towards the artifact. The moment they made contact, their world exploded into a kaleidoscope of sensation. Images flashed through their minds. Ancient starships bearing both human and Elysian markings, strange worlds teeming with life, vast cities that defied the laws of physics. They staggered back, overwhelmed by the influx of information. Keith felt Cora's body press against his, their hybrid physiologies instinctively seeking balance through contact. "It's not just a map," Cora gasped, her eyes wide. "It's a communication device." Dr. Vex's voice cut through their daze. "The energy output is off the charts. It seems to be reaching out, trying to connect with something." As they watched, the artifact's energy field began to intensify, forming a swirling vortex that threatened to engulf the chamber. Keith and Cora looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. Without a word, they stepped forward, hands clasped tightly together. They reached out with their combined hybrid abilities, attempting to channel and control the surging energy. As their consciousness merged with the artifact's field, they became aware of a presence. An artificial intelligence, ancient beyond imagining, awakening after eons of dormancy. In that moment, as their minds touched the vast network of knowledge contained within the artifact, Keith and Cora realized that their journey was a long way to go. In fact, it was just beginning. The vast consciousness of the artifact enveloped them, its ancient knowledge flooding their minds with images and sensations beyond human comprehension. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the chamber, snapping Keith and Cora back to reality. The energy vortex surrounding the artifact pulsed erratically, sending out waves of force that threatened to tear the ancient structure apart. "We need to stabilize it," Cora shouted over the deafening roar of energy. Keith nodded, his hybrid instincts kicking in. Together, they reached out with their combined abilities, channeling the surging power and guiding it back into a stable pattern. The effort was immense, taxing their newfound abilities to their limits. As the energy settled, Dr. Vex's voice cut through the din. "Fascinating. It appears you've initiated some sort of dormant protocol within the artifact systems." Before they could process this information, their comms crackled to life with Admiral Zara's urgent voice. "Keith, Cora, Dr. Vex, return to the flagship immediately. The situation has escalated." The journey back was a blur of activity. As their shuttle docked with the Galactic Pioneer flagship, they were met with a scene of controlled chaos. Crew members rushed about with purpose, their faces etched with tension. Admiral Zara herself greeted them as they disembarked. "Follow me," she said tersely, leading them towards the command center. "The activation of the artifact has set off a chain reaction we couldn't have anticipated." As they entered the command center, Keith and Cora were struck by the sheer number of important figures gathered there. Human diplomats stood shoulder to shoulder with Elysian elders, while galactic pioneer officials moved between them, facilitating discussions. Admiral Zara quickly brought them up to speed. The energy surge from the artifact was detected across multiple systems. We've been flooded with communications from various factions, all demanding explanations and access to the technology. A tall, charismatic human stepped forward. Keith, Cora, I'm Marcus Graves, representing the human contingent. We believe this discovery could revolutionize our civilization. We need immediate access to study and implement this technology. Before Keith could respond, an elderly Elysian with intricate bioluminescent patterns spoke up. I am Elder Talia. We Elysians caution against hasty action. This artifact is clearly tied to our ancient past. We must approach it with reverence and careful study. The room erupted into a cacophony of arguments, each faction pushing for their own agenda. Keith and Cora exchanged a glance, their newfound mental link allowing them to communicate without words. They could sense the fear, excitement, and tension roiling through the room. Suddenly, Dr. Vex cleared his throat loudly, drawing attention. If I may, I believe Keith and Cora's unique status as human Elysian hybrids puts them in a singular position to offer insight. All eyes turned to them. Keith took a deep breath, feeling Cora's reassuring presence in his mind. What we experienced in the artifact chamber was extraordinary. The artifact isn't just a map or a weapon. It's part of a vast communication network spanning the galaxy. Cora continued seamlessly. We believe it was created by an ancient civilization, one that may have had ties to both humans and Elysians. Its purpose seems to be fostering connection and understanding between different species. Their words had a visible impact on the assembled leaders. The tension in the room shifted, replaced by a sense of awe at the implications of their discovery. Taking advantage of the moment, Keith and Cora proposed their plan for a joint task force. The idea gained traction quickly, with leaders from all factions seeing the benefit of a cooperative approach. As discussions continued, Keith and Cora found themselves at the center of attention. Their ability to communicate telepathically became increasingly apparent, drawing curious and sometimes wary looks from those around them. Dr. Vex approached them during a lull in the negotiations. I'd like to run some tests if you're willing, he said, his eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. Your connection could be the key to unlocking the artifact's full potential. Before they could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Admiral Zara rushed to a console, her face paling as she read the incoming data. We've detected an unidentified vessel approaching at impossible speeds, she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. It's technology. It's like nothing we've ever seen. The room erupted into panicked discussions. Keith felt Cora's hand slip into his, their shared apprehension manifesting in a subtle glow of their hybrid markings. Admiral Zara turned to them, her expression grave. Keith, Cora, your experience with the artifact and your unique abilities make you our best chance at establishing communication. We need you to make first contact. The weight of the responsibility settled on their shoulders. Keith looked at Cora, seeing his own mix of fear and willpower reflected in her eyes. Without a word, they nodded their agreement. As they were rushed towards a specialized communication vessel, Keith and Cora realized that they stood on the precipice of a new era. The outcome of their encounter with this advanced alien civilization would shape the future of not just humanity and the Elysians, but potentially the entire galaxy. The communication vessels hatch sealed behind them with a hiss of pressurized air. As they strapped themselves in, Keith felt Cora's thoughts brush against his mind. Together, her mental voice whispered, a mix of anticipation and willpower. Together, Keith affirmed, as the ship's engines roared to life, propelling them towards an encounter that would change everything. Everything. As the communication vessel detached from the Galactic Pioneer, Keith and Cora felt the weight of their mission settle upon them. The ship's advanced hybrid technology hummed to life, propelling them towards a mysterious alien vessel that loomed in the distance. Keith's hands danced across the control panel, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to navigate the treacherous space between the two ships with ease. Cora sat beside him, her eyes closed in concentration as she extended her Elysian senses, probing the void for any sign of danger. "Keith," she whispered, her eyes snapping open. "There's something different about that ship. It's not like anything we've encountered before." As they drew closer, Keith saw what she meant. The alien vessel seemed to shimmer and shift, its form adapting to the surrounding space like a living organism. Its sleek, organic lines defied conventional engineering, appearing both solid and fluid at the same time. Suddenly, a beam of brilliant energy erupted from the alien ship, engulfing their vessel in a cocoon of light. Keith's instinct screamed at him to take evasive action, but he felt Cora's calming presence in his mind. "Wait," she urged. "It's not an attack. It's scanning us." As the beam passed through them, Keith felt a tingling sensation coursing through his body. He glanced at Cora and saw her hybrid markings glowing in response to the energy. The scan seemed to linger on them, as if fascinated by their unique physiology. Without warning, the world around them dissolved into a kaleidoscope of light and sensation. Keith felt as if his very atoms were being pulled apart and reassembled. He reached out instinctively, his hand finding Cora's in the chaos. When reality solidified again, they found themselves standing in a vast circular chamber. Gone was the familiar interior of their communication vessel. Instead, they were surrounded by pulsating bioorganic technology that defied description. The walls seemed alive, patterns of light and color flowing across their surface in response to their presence. "Where are we?" Keith breathed, his enhanced senses overwhelmed by the alien environment. Before Cora could respond, a figure materialized in the center of the room. Tall and ethereal, the being radiated an aura of ancient wisdom and power. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but composed of swirling energy patterns that constantly shifted and changed. "Welcome, children of two worlds," the being spoke, its voice resonating directly in their minds. "I am Zephyr, ambassador of the Celestial Consortium." Keith and Cora exchanged glances, their shared mental link buzzing with a mix of awe and apprehension. Drawing on their training, they projected thoughts of peace and goodwill towards the alien entity. Zephyr's form rippled, a gesture they interpreted as approval. "Your ability to communicate without words serves you well. The Celestial Consortium has long monitored the development of your civilizations. The recent activation of the Elysian Artifact Network has drawn our attention, and our concern." As Zephyr spoke, images flashed through Keith and Cora's minds. Vast star maps, ancient technologies, and civilizations beyond their imagining. They saw the Consortium's role as guardians of galactic balance, shepherding young species towards enlightenment. "Your hybrid nature," Zephyr continued, focusing its attention on Keith and Cora, "represents a potential evolutionary leap. We believe you may be capable of bridging the gap between your world and the greater galactic community." A sense of excitement and trepidation washed over them as they realized the magnitude of what Zephyr was offering. Access to the Consortium's knowledge could catapult their civilization forward by centuries, if not millennia. However, Zephyr's mental voice took on a note of caution. "Such power comes with great responsibility. Before we can grant you access to our knowledge, you must prove yourselves worthy. You must undergo a series of trials that will test not only your abilities, but the very essence of your hybrid nature." Keith felt Cora's purpose mirror his own. They had come too far to turn back now. With a shared thought, they agreed to Zephyr's terms. The chamber around them began to shift and transform. The sleek alien technology melted away, replaced by a dense, holographic jungle teeming with alien life. Vibrant flora pulsed with bioluminescence, while unseen creatures called out from the shadows. "Your first trial begins now," Zephyr's voice echoed as its form dissipated. "You must navigate this environment separately, relying on your individual strengths and your shared bond to overcome the challenges ahead." Before they could protest, an invisible force pulled Keith and Cora apart. Dense foliage sprang up between them, cutting off visual contact. Yet, even as they were physically separated, their mental link remained strong. Keith found himself faced with a series of alien puzzles, each more complex than the last. Strange symbols and energy patterns danced before his eyes, challenging his enhanced human problem-solving skills. He reached out with his mind, sharing what he saw with Cora. Meanwhile, Cora confronted a rapidly changing landscape that required split-second decisions. Her Elysian intuition was pushed to its limits as she navigated treacherous terrain and avoided hidden dangers. Through their link, she guided Keith, helping him anticipate the puzzle's shifting patterns. As they progressed deeper into the holographic jungle, Keith and Cora began to discover new facets of their hybrid abilities. Keith found he could manipulate the energy fields around him, using them to unravel particularly difficult puzzles. Cora realized she could sense the ebb and flow of the simulated environment, predicting changes before they occurred. Their shared consciousness hummed with excitement at each new discovery. They were no longer simply human or Elysian, but something entirely new. Their hybrid nature allowed them to approach problems from unique angles, combining logic and intuition in ways neither of their parent species could. Hours seemed to pass as they navigated the increasingly difficult challenges. Exhaustion began to set in, but Keith and Cora drew strength from each other, their mental bond a constant source of support and encouragement. Finally, they emerged into a clearing where the holographic jungle faded away, revealing the alien chamber once more. Zephyr materialized before them, its energy patterns swirling with what they interpreted as approval. "You have passed the first trial," Zephyr announced. "Your ability to work in harmony, even when separated, is commendable. However, this is merely the beginning. The trials ahead will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine." As Zephyr spoke, Keith became acutely aware of Cora's presence beside him. The shared experience of the trial had brought them closer than ever before. He felt a growing attraction, a pull that went beyond their mental connection. Glancing at Cora, he saw his own mix of exhaustion and exhilaration mirrored in her eyes. Zephyr observed their interaction with interest. "The next trial will delve deeper into your connection. True symbiosis between species requires understanding and acceptance on all levels, physical, mental, and emotional." Keith and Cora stood ready, their hands instinctively finding each other. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As hybrid pioneers on the brink of a new era of galactic relations, they knew their actions would shape the future of their civilizations. The chamber began to shift once more, the alien technology reconfiguring itself for the next trial. Keith and Cora braced themselves, their minds and bodies humming with nervous energy. The next test loomed before them, promising to push their newfound abilities and growing bond to the limit. Limits. The room around them began to shift once more, the alien technology reconfiguring itself for the next trial. Keith and Cora braced themselves, their minds and bodies humming with nervous energy. In an instant, the chamber transformed into a vast, maze-like structure. Towering walls of shimmering energy sprang up around them, separating Keith and Cora with a sudden, impenetrable barrier. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy, and the floor beneath their feet seemed to pulse with life. Keith's enhanced senses went into overdrive as he scanned his surroundings. The maze stretched out before him, a labyrinth of twisting corridors and dead ends. He could feel Cora's presence in his mind, a comforting anchor in this alien environment. "Cora, can you hear me?" He projected his thoughts, testing their mental link. "Yes, Keith." Her response came immediately, tinged with a mix of apprehension and tenacity. "This maze, it's alive somehow. I can feel it shifting." As if responding to her words, the walls around them began to move, rearranging themselves in a fluid dance of energy and matter. Keith's instincts kicked in, and he started to navigate through the ever-changing pathways. He leaped over a suddenly appearing gap, his enhanced agility allowing him to clear it with ease. Landing on the other side, he felt a surge of satisfaction, only to be met with a wave of caution from Cora. "Be careful, Keith," her mental voice warned. "The environment is becoming more unstable. I can sense fluctuations in the energy patterns." Keith nodded, even though Cora couldn't see him. He pressed on, using his strength to climb over low walls and duck under shifting barriers. All the while, he kept his mind open, sharing his progress with Cora. On her end, Cora was facing her own challenges. Her Elysian intuition guided her through the maze of shifting patterns, allowing her to anticipate changes before they occurred. She moved with graceful efficiency, her body flowing like water through the narrowing passages. As they progressed deeper into the maze, the challenges intensified. Keith found himself facing a section where the gravity seemed to fluctuate wildly. One moment he was walking normally, the next he was floating weightlessly, then suddenly pulled down with crushing force. "Cora," he called out mentally, his body straining against the gravitational shifts. "I'm stuck. The gravity here is insane." He felt Cora's focus sharpen through their link. "I see it, Keith. There's a pattern to the fluctuations. Try to time your movements with the low-gravity phases." Following her guidance, Keith managed to navigate through the gravity-warped section, his movements becoming a strange dance of leaps and controlled falls. Meanwhile, Cora encountered a stretch of the maze filled with intense temperature variations. Freezing cold alternated with searing heat in rapid succession. She gritted her teeth, pushing through the discomfort, her Elysian physiology adapting to the extreme conditions. As they neared what felt like the center of the maze, Keith and Cora sensed a change in the energy around them. The walls began to shift more rapidly, entire sections disappearing and reappearing without warning. "Something's wrong," Cora projected, her mental voice tinged with concern. "The maze is becoming unstable." Keith felt it too. The once smooth energy patterns were now jagged and erratic. He pushed forward, driven by an instinctive need to reach Cora. Suddenly, they found themselves face to face, separated by a pulsing energy barrier. Keith's heart raced as he saw Cora, her hybrid markings glowing intensely in response to the surrounding energy. "We need to deactivate this barrier," Cora said, her eyes scanning the shimmering field between them. Keith nodded, studying the energy patterns. "I think I see a way. If we synchronize our movements, we might be able to disrupt the field." They locked eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. Moving in perfect unison, they began a complex series of gestures, their bodies mirroring each other on either side of the barrier. As they moved, their hybrid abilities flared to life, energy flowing from their hands and intertwining with the barrier's patterns. The physical coordination required brought them tantalizingly close, their bodies almost touching as they worked to unravel the energy field. Keith could feel the heat radiating from Cora's skin, smell the faint scent of her hair. The intimacy of the moment sent a jolt of electricity through him that had nothing to do with the surrounding energy. With a final, synchronized movement, the barrier between them collapsed. Keith and Cora stumbled forward, caught in a brief embrace before regaining their balance. The physical contact sent a wave of shared sensation through their mental link, intensifying the growing attraction between them. Before they could fully process the moment, The maze around them dissolved, revealing the alien chamber once more. Zephyr materialized before them, its energy patterns swirling with what seemed like approval and concern. "You have passed the second trial," Zephyr announced, its mental voice resonating in their minds. "Your ability to work together under extreme physical and mental stress is impressive. However, we face an unexpected complication." Keith and Cora exchanged glances, their shared exhaustion and exhilaration giving way to a new sense of apprehension. Zephyr's form flickered, its energy patterns becoming more agitated. "The scans from your ship have triggered an ancient defense system within the artifact network. A chain reaction has begun that could destabilize the entire galaxy if not stopped." The weight of this revelation settled on Keith and Cora like a physical force. They stood straighter, their fatigue forgotten in the face of this new threat. "There is no time for further preparation," Zephyr continued. "You must undertake an emergency mission to a distant artifact hub. It is located in a highly unstable region of space, but your unique abilities make you the only ones capable of reaching it in time." Before Keith or Cora could respond, the chamber around them began to shift once more. The alien technology swirled and coalesced, forming the sleek lines of a small spacecraft. "This vessel will take you to the artifact hub," Zephyr explained. "The future of the stars now rests in your hands." With a final surge of energy, Zephyr's form dissipated, and Keith and Cora found themselves transported into the cockpit of the alien craft. The ship's systems hummed to life around them, responding to their hybrid physiology. As the spacecraft launched into the unknown reaches of space, Keith and Cora shared a look of dedication. They had no time to process the trials they had just endured or the growing tension between them. The mission had demanded their full attention. The stars streaked by outside the view screen as they hurtled towards their destination. The ship's advanced navigation system guided them through a series of spatial anomalies, each more treacherous than the last. Keith's enhanced reflexes were pushed to their limits as he piloted the craft, while Cora's intuition allowed her to anticipate and avoid hidden dangers. The confined space of the cockpit forced them to work in extremely close proximity. Every movement brought them into contact, each touch sending a jolt of shared sensation through their mental link. The physical and emotional intensity of their situation simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. As they navigated through a particularly dense cluster of spatial distortions, Keith felt Cora's hand brush against his arm. The contact sent a wave of images flooding through their shared consciousness, flashes of the trials they had endured, mixed with glimpses of a possible future together. Keith pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. The artifact hub loomed ahead, a massive structure floating in the heart of a swirling nebula. As they approached, the ship's sensors began to light up with warnings. "The instability is worse than we thought," Cora said, her voice tight with concentration as she analyzed the incoming data. "The artifact's energy signature is fluctuating wildly." Keith nodded, his hands dancing across the ship's controls. "We'll have to time our approach perfectly." "Are you ready?" Cora met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the swirling chaos outside. Together, she affirmed, as one, they guided the ship towards the artifact hub, plunging into the heart of the galactic storm. The fate of countless civilizations hung in the balance as Keith and Cora prepared to face their greatest challenge yet. As Keith and Cora's spacecraft hurtled towards the artifact hub, the relative calm of their journey abruptly shattered. The ship lurched violently, tossed about by invisible forces that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "Gravitational anomalies," Keith called out, his enhanced reflexes struggling to keep the vessel stable. "They're everywhere." Cora's hands flew across the control panel, her Elysian intuition guiding her as she attempted to compensate for the unpredictable gravitational pulls. The hub's instability is affecting the entire region, she said, her voice tight with concentration. The ship's hull groaned under the strain, metal creaking ominously as the anomalies intensified. Keith and Cora found themselves pressed together in the narrow confines of the cockpit, their bodies moving in sync as they fought to maintain control. "We need to reroute power to the structural integrity field," Keith said, reaching across Cora to access a set of controls on her side of the cockpit. The movement brought his face inches from hers, and for a moment, their eyes locked. The physical proximity sent a jolt of shared sensation through their mental link, a mix of adrenaline and something deeper, more primal. Cora nodded, shifting to allow Keith better access, while maintaining her focus on navigation. "Do it," she said, her breath warm against his cheek. "I'll try to plot a course through the least affected areas." As they worked in tandem, their hybrid physiologies kicked into overdrive, allowing them to withstand the extreme forces buffeting the ship. Keith marveled at how their bodies seemed to complement each other perfectly, each movement flowing seamlessly into the next. Finally, after what felt like hours of intense maneuvering, the gravitational anomalies began to subside. Keith and Cora allowed themselves a moment of relief, their bodies still pressed close in the cramped cockpit. "We made it," Keith breathed, his heart racing from the ordeal. Cora nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "We did. But look, we're not out of danger yet." Keith followed her gaze to the view screen and felt his breath catch in his throat. Before them stretched a vast asteroid field, dense with rocky bodies ranging from the size of pebbles to small moons. And at the center of it all loomed their destination, the artifact hub. The structure was massive, easily dwarfing their small craft. Its surface was a complex geometry of angles and curves, pulsing with an otherworldly energy that seemed to distort the very fabric of space around it. "The energy emissions are off the charts," Cora said, her eyes widening as she analyzed the incoming data. "If we don't stabilize it soon—" She didn't need to finish the thought. Keith could see the destabilizing effect the hub was having on the surrounding space. Asteroids shuddered and cracked as waves of energy washed over them, while others were drawn into spiraling orbits around the structure. "We need to get closer," Keith said, his hands tightening on the controls. "Can you plot us a course through this mess?" Cora nodded, her fingers dancing across the navigation panel. "I think so, but it's going to be tight. We'll need perfect coordination." As they began to weave their way through the treacherous asteroid field, Keith found himself relying more and more on their mental link. He could sense Cora's intentions a split second before she acted, allowing him to adjust the ship's trajectory with uncanny precision. They dodged and weaved, the ship's hull sometimes clearing massive asteroids by mere inches. Keith's enhanced reflexes were pushed to their absolute limit as he made split-second course corrections, while Cora's intuition guided them through the chaos with an almost preternatural sense of timing. Just as they approached the hub's main docking port, a massive energy surge erupted from the structure. The ship's systems flickered and died, leaving them drifting helplessly in space. "No!" Keith shouted, frantically trying to restart the engines. Come on! Come on!" Cora's eyes widened in alarm. "Keith, look out!" He followed her gaze to see a cluster of asteroids hurtling towards them, drawn in by the hub's fluctuating gravitational field. In that moment, Keith knew they had only one option left. "We have to abandon ship," he said, already reaching for the emergency gear. "We'll have to make it to the hub on our own." Cora nodded, her face set with drive. As they donned their emergency suits, designed to interface with their hybrid physiology, Keith couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret at leaving behind the advanced alien craft that had brought them this far. With a hiss of depressurization, the airlock opened, and Keith and Cora launched themselves into the void of space. The sensation was dizzying, a free fall with no up or down, surrounded by the swirling chaos of the asteroid field and the pulsing energy of the hub. Instinctively, they reached for each other, their bodies intertwining as they activated their hybrid abilities. A shimmering field of energy formed around them, protecting them from the harsh vacuum and debris. "Focus on the entrance." Cora's voice echoed in Keith's mind through their mental link. "We can use our combined energy to propel us there." Keith nodded, concentrating on channeling his energy in concert with Cora's. They moved as one, their bodies working in perfect harmony as they navigated the treacherous space between their abandoned ship and the hub's entrance. Asteroids whizzed past them, some close enough that Keith could have reached out and touched them. The hub loomed larger and larger in their field of vision, its pulsing energy growing more intense with each passing second. With a final burst of energy, they reached the hub's entrance, a massive airlock that seemed to sense their presence and began to cycle open. As they tumbled inside, gravity reasserted itself, and they found themselves sprawled on the floor of a vast, ancient control room. Keith helped Cora to her feet, both of them breathing heavily from the exertion. As they took in their surroundings, they were struck by the sheer scale and complexity of the technology around them. The walls were lined with pulsating crystals and intricate machinery that seemed to hum with life at their presence. "Look," Cora said, pointing to a central console. I think we can interface directly with the hub systems." As they approached the console, Keith felt a strange, tingling sensation throughout his body. He could sense the hub systems reaching out to them, recognizing their hybrid physiology as something both familiar and new. "We need to stay in physical contact to maintain a connection," Cora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you ready?" Keith nodded, taking Cora's hand in his own. As they reached out to touch the console together, he felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had experienced before. Their minds merged with the ancient systems of the hub, and in that moment, Keith knew that their greatest challenge was only just beginning. The ancient systems of the hub surged through their linked minds, flooding them with an overwhelming torrent of information. Keith gasped, his body trembling as he struggled to process the influx of data. He could feel Cora's presence in his mind, her thoughts intertwining with his own as they navigated the complex network of the artifact hub. "It's too much," Cora whispered, her voice strained. "We need to focus." Keith nodded, concentrating on the task at hand. Together, they sifted through the vast repository of knowledge, searching for a way to stabilize the hub and prevent a catastrophic meltdown. Suddenly, an alert blared through the control room, startling them from their merged state. Keith's eyes snapped open, focusing on a holographic display that had materialized above the console. "Incoming ships," he said, his voice tight with tension. "A lot of them." Cora leaned in, her brow furrowing as she analyzed the data. "Scavengers," she said. "They must have detected the hub's energy fluctuations." The gravity of their situation hit Keith like a physical blow. They were trapped inside an unstable artifact hub, with a horde of scavengers bearing down on them, and the fate of humanity and all alien species hanging in the balance. "We need to make a decision," Cora said, her eyes meeting Keith's. "Do we activate the failsafe and risk destroying the hub, or do we try to escape?" Before Keith could respond, another alert sounded. A new energy signature appeared on the sensors, dwarfing even the scavenger fleet. "Celestial Consortium," Keith breathed, recognizing the massive vessel. "They must have sent reinforcements to oversee our mission." Time was running out. With scavengers closing in and the consortium ship approaching, Keith and Cora made a split-second decision. "Partial activation," Keith said, his hands moving across the console. "We'll seal off sections of the hub but leave an escape route open." Cora nodded, her fingers dancing alongside his as they initiated the sequence. The hub shuddered around them, energy crackling through its ancient systems. Walls of shimmering force fields sprang into existence, sealing off vast portions of the structure. A wave of stabilizing energy surged through the artifact network, temporarily halting the impending meltdown. But their actions had consequences. A countdown appeared on the main display, ticking down the seconds until total hub lockdown. "We need to move," Cora said, already stepping away from the console. As they turned to leave, a burst of energy erupted from the hub's core, washing over them in a blinding flash. Keith stumbled, feeling as if his very atoms were being rearranged. When the light faded, he felt different, stronger, more attuned to the energy flowing around him. Cora staggered to her feet, her eyes wide with wonder. "Keith," she said, her voice filled with awe, "I think our merger with the hub systems has changed us." There was no time to fully process the implications of their transformation. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the corridors, signaling the arrival of the scavenger forces. Keith and Cora sprinted through the maze-like passageways of the hub, their enhanced bodies moving with newfound grace and speed. Their mental link hummed with shared awareness, allowing them to anticipate and avoid patrols of scavengers who had managed to breach the outer defenses. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a group of heavily armed scavengers. Without hesitation, Keith leaped into action, his enhanced strength allowing him to disarm the first attacker with ease. Cora focused her newfound energy manipulation abilities, creating a shimmering barrier that deflected a barrage of laser fire. Working in perfect synchronization, they fought their way through the scavenger forces. Keith's enhanced reflexes and strength made him a formidable close-quarters combatant, while Cora's energy manipulation kept their enemies at bay and disrupted their weapons. As they neared the docking bay, a familiar figure stepped out from behind a pillar, blocking their path. It was Draz, the scavenger captain, his cybernetic eye glowing with malice. Well, Draz sneered, raising a massive energy cannon. "Looks like we've got ourselves some enhanced specimens. The boss will pay a pretty price for you two." Keith tensed, ready to spring into action, but Cora placed a hand on his arm. Through their mental link, he sensed her plan. In a fluid motion, Cora raised her hand, focusing her energy manipulation abilities on Draz's weapon. The cannon sputtered and died, its power source drained. Caught off guard, Draz barely had time to react before Keith closed the distance between them. The two engaged in a brutal hand-to-hand fight, with Keith's enhanced strength giving him a clear advantage. In a matter of moments, Draz lay unconscious at their feet. But their victory was short-lived. As Draz fell, his hand brushed against a device on his belt, activating a distress signal to his crew. "We need to move now," Keith said, already sprinting toward the docking bay. They burst into the vast chamber, their eyes immediately falling on their original spacecraft. It lay in ruins, clearly damaged beyond repair in the initial attack. "There," Cora said, pointing to a sleek scavenger vessel. "We can use that to escape." As they approached the ship, alarms blared throughout the docking bay. The remaining scavenger crew was converging on their location. Keith took up a defensive position, using his enhanced strength to hurl debris at the incoming attackers. Cora focused on the ship, her energy manipulation abilities allowing her to interface with its systems and override the security protocols. "I've got it," Cora called out as the ship's engines roared to life. Keith leaped aboard just as the first volley of laser fire erupted across the docking bay. The ship's shields flickered to life, deflecting the barrage as Cora guided it towards the bay doors. As they blasted out of the hub, the final lockdown sequence began. Massive doors of energy and metal slammed shut behind them, sealing the ancient structure. Keith took the controls, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to navigate the treacherous asteroid field with incredible precision. In the distance, they could see Admiral Zara's rescue fleet engaging the main scavenger ship. But their escape was far from assured. Looming ahead of them was a massive celestial consortium vessel, its presence complicating their already perilous route. As Keith weaved through the asteroid field, avoiding both scavenger pursuers and the consortium ship, Cora worked frantically at the communication console. "Admiral Zara," she called out, her voice tense. "This is Cora. We've stabilized the artifact network, but we're under heavy fire. Request immediate assistance." Just as it seemed they might break free of the asteroid field, a massive energy pulse erupted from the consortium vessel. The pulse washed over their ship, causing its systems to flicker and die. Keith fought with the controls, but it was no use. They were dead in space. As their ship drifted helplessly, the asteroid field before them began to clear, pushed aside by some unseen force. In its place, a massive structure shimmered into view, an ancient space station that dwarfed even the artifact hub they had just escaped. A powerful tractor beam lanced out from the station, enveloping their ship in its grasp. As they were inexorably drawn towards the mysterious structure, Keith and Cora shared a look of tenacity mixed with apprehension. "I don't think our mission is over yet," Keith said, his eyes fixed on the looming station. Cora nodded, her hand finding his as the ship was pulled into a vast docking bay. "Whatever happens," she said, "we face it together." As the docking bay doors closed behind them, sealing them within the ancient station, they saw the celestial consortium vessel entering alongside them. A familiar figure emerged from the larger ship, Zephyr, accompanied by a group of unknown aliens. Keith and Cora steeled themselves, knowing that the true purpose of their hybrid transformation was about to be revealed, and that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. As the docking bay doors closed behind them, Keith and Cora watched Zephyr emerge from the celestial consortium vessel, flanked by a group of alien beings unlike any they had encountered before. The aliens' forms defied easy description, each one a unique blend of organic and technological components. Some floated on cushions of energy, while others moved on multiple limbs that seemed to phase in and out of reality. Their bodies shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence, and Keith found himself momentarily mesmerized by their alien beauty. Zephyr gestured for them to follow, his movements fluid and purposeful. As Keith and Cora stepped out of their commandeered scavenger ship, they felt a subtle shift in the air around them. The station seemed to come alive at their presence, lights flickering on and systems humming to life as they passed. Cora's eyes widened as she sensed the energy flowing through the structure. "Keith," she whispered, her voice tinged with awe, "I can feel the station responding to us. It's like it recognizes our hybrid physiology." Keith nodded, his own enhanced senses picking up on the subtle vibrations coursing through the metal beneath their feet. As they walked, he noticed that the dormant systems around them were awakening, panels lighting up and holographic displays shimmering into existence. The group approached a massive ornate doorway at the far end of the docking bay. As they drew near, intricate patterns etched into its surface began to glow with an inner light. The door slid open silently, revealing a vast chamber beyond. Stepping inside, Keith and Cora found themselves surrounded by advanced technology that made even the artifact hub pale in comparison. Holographic displays filled the air, showing streams of data and galactic maps. Pulsating energy conduits crisscrossed the walls and ceiling, converging on a central point. At the heart of the chamber stood a colossal crystalline structure, its facets reflecting and refracting the light in mesmerizing patterns. It dwarfed the artifact hub they had interfaced with earlier, and Keith felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation as he gazed upon it. Zephyr led them towards a pair of raised platforms near the central crystal. As Keith and Cora approached, they could feel the energy emanating from the structure, calling to the hybrid part of their beings. With a look of understanding passing between them, they stepped onto the platforms. Instantly, energy fields sprang up around their bodies, enveloping them in a cocoon of pulsing light. Keith gritted his teeth as the scan began, waves of discomfort washing over him. He reached out instinctively, finding Cora's hand and gripping it tightly. The moment their fingers intertwined, the scanning process intensified. Keith gasped as he felt his consciousness expand, connecting not just with Cora, but with the vast network of information contained within the station systems. Images and data flooded his mind, too fast to fully comprehend. He saw flashes of alien worlds, glimpses of technologies beyond his wildest imagination, and echoes of ancient conflicts that had shaped the galaxy. Through their mental link, he could sense Cora experiencing the same overwhelming influx of information. They clung to each other, both physically and mentally, using their connection as an anchor in the sea of data threatening to drown them. As the scan continued, holographic displays around the chamber came to life, projecting complex diagrams and readouts of their hybrid physiology. Zephyr and the alien delegation studied the results intently, communicating in a series of gestures and energy pulses that Keith and Cora could now partially understand. With their hybrid abilities amplified by the station's technology, Keith and Cora found themselves able to access and interpret vast swathes of the information network. As they delved deeper, a startling revelation began to take shape. Cora, Keith said, his voice strained with the effort of processing the information, our transformation, it wasn't an accident. The Celestial Consortium planned this. Cora's eyes widened as she accessed the same information. They've been guiding both our species, humans and Elysians, pushing us towards the point where hybridization became possible. But why? Keith asked, his heart pounding from the implications. Before Cora could respond, alarms blared throughout the station, cutting through their shared revelation. The holographic displays shifted, showing multiple ships entering the system. Their energy signatures matched those of the scavenger fleet, but amplified to a dangerous degree. Draz, Keith growled, recognizing the familiar configuration of the lead ship. He must have called for reinforcements. Zephyr and the alien delegation sprang into action, their movements a blur as they activated the station's long-dormant security systems. Keith and Cora, still connected to the station's network, felt the defensive protocols coming online. With a shared look of dedication, they began to coordinate the station's response. Their hybrid minds worked in perfect synchronization, processing vast amounts of tactical data and making split-second decisions. Energy shields sprang to life around the station, their iridescent surfaces rippling as they deflected the first volley of scavenger fire. Automated defense turrets emerged from hidden compartments, their targeting systems guided by Keith and Cora's enhanced perception. As the battle intensified, Keith noticed a subsystem within the station's network beginning to awaken. It pulsed with an energy unlike anything he had encountered before, hinting at the artifact network's true purpose. Just as he attempted to access this mysterious subsystem, Cora's voice cut through their mental link. Keith, the station's core. Something's happening. The central crystalline structure began to pulse with intense energy, its facets glowing with an inner fire. The chamber trembled as the station's systems reconfigured themselves, entering a state that even the Celestial Consortium seemed unprepared for. Holographic displays flickered and changed, revealing a galactic map dotted with countless points of light. Each point represented an active artifact, forming a vast network that spanned the cosmos. As the station underwent this transformation, Keith and Cora felt a surge of power flowing through them. The attacking scavenger fleet found itself caught in a web of energy fields emanating from the structure, their ships immobilized and weapons disabled. With the immediate threat contained, Zephyr approached the platforms where Keith and Cora stood. His alien features were unreadable, but there was a sense of gravity in his movements as he gestured towards the pulsing crystalline structure. Keith and Cora shared a look of understanding. Whatever came next would determine not just the fate of the scavenger fleet, but potentially the future of galactic civilization itself. As they turned their attention back to the central crystal, they knew that their greatest challenge, and perhaps their true purpose, was about to be revealed. Revealed, the crystalline structure pulsed with increasing intensity, bathing the chamber in waves of ethereal light. Keith and Cora exchanged a determined glance, their hybrid instincts urging them to action. Without a word, they stepped off the platforms and approached the central crystal. As they drew near, tendrils of energy reached out, almost beckoning them closer. Keith took a deep breath, his enhanced senses picking up the subtle vibrations emanating from the structure. "We need to interface directly with the core systems," Cora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's the only way to gain control." Keith nodded, his heart racing with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Together, Cora affirmed, reaching out to take his hand. As their fingers intertwined, they pressed their free hands against the crystal's smooth surface. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. A surge of raw power coursed through their bodies, causing their hybrid physiology to light up with newfound energy. Keith gasped as his muscles tensed, feeling stronger and more responsive than ever before. His mind expanded, connecting with the station's vast network of information and control systems. Beside him, Cora's eyes glowed with an inner fire, her energy manipulation abilities amplified to unprecedented levels. Through their deepened mental link, they navigated the complex web of the station's core systems. Holographic displays flashed around them, responding to their unspoken commands as they sought to assert control over the artifact network. "The scavenger fleet," Keith said through gritted teeth, his enhanced perception allowing him to track the enemy's ships outside. "We need to neutralize them." Cora nodded, her consciousness meshing seamlessly with his as they accessed the station's defensive capabilities. With a shared thought, they initiated a carefully calibrated electromagnetic pulse, directing it towards the attacking vessels. The effect was instantaneous. The scavenger ships, caught in the invisible web of energy, suddenly went dark. Their weapon systems powered down, engines sputtered and died, leaving them drifting helplessly in the void of space. As the immediate threat subsided, Zephyr approached, his alien features set in an expression that Keith interpreted as a mix of approval and curiosity. The being gestured towards a series of holographic projections that sprang to life around them. Images flashed before their eyes, star systems, alien worlds, and vast networks of energy connecting them all. Keith and Cora absorbed the information, their hybrid minds processing the data at an incredible speed. "The artifact network," Cora breathed, her eyes wide with understanding. "It's a peacekeeping system, isn't it?" Zephyr nodded, his movements fluid and precise. More images appeared, showing conflicts across the galaxy being monitored and diffused through the subtle influence of the artifacts. "And we're meant to be its caretakers," Keith added, the realization dawning on him. "That's why the Celestial Consortium guided our species towards hybridization." Before they could delve deeper into this revelation, a familiar voice crackled over the station's communication array. "This is Admiral Zara of the Galactic Pioneers. We've arrived at the system's edge and are awaiting further instructions." Keith and Cora shared a look of relief. With a thought, they activated the station's long-range communications. "Admiral," Keith said, his voice steady despite the strain of maintaining their connection to the core systems. "The immediate threat has been neutralized. We need your assistance in securing the disabled scavenger ships." As Admiral Zara acknowledged the request and began dispatching teams to board the immobilized vessels, Zephyr guided Keith and Cora towards a series of medical bays hidden within the chamber's walls. The alien delegation followed, their movements betraying a sense of urgency. "They need to integrate our genetic template into the station systems," Cora explained, interpreting the data flowing through their mental link. "It's to ensure future generations of hybrids can operate the network." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Keith and Cora underwent a series of examinations and procedures, their bodies scanned and sampled as the station systems worked to incorporate their unique physiology into its core programming. Throughout the process, Keith found himself hyper-aware of Cora's presence. Their enhanced senses, combined with the prolonged physical proximity, awakened a new level of attraction between them. He could hear the quickening of her heartbeat, smell the subtle changes in her body chemistry, and feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Cora met his gaze, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. It was clear she was experiencing the same heightened awareness. The station systems, ever adaptive, detected these changes and adjusted the integration process accordingly. As the genetic sampling concluded, Keith and Cora emerged from the medical bays to find the chamber transformed. The central crystal now pulsed with a steady, comforting rhythm, and holographic displays filled the air with images of countless worlds connected by the artifact network. "It's incredible," Cora said, her voice filled with awe as she took in the true scale of the precursor race's influence. All these civilizations, connected and protected by this system. Keith nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. And now it's up to us to maintain it. Their moment of contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of Admiral Zara, who entered the chamber flanked by a security detail. Behind them, looking significantly less imposing than before, was the captured scavenger Captain Draz. "We've secured the scavenger fleet," Admiral Zara reported, her eyes widening as she took in the ancient station's interior. "The crews have been transferred to holding cells aboard our ships. We brought Draz here for questioning, given his knowledge of the artifact network." Keith and Cora exchanged a glance, silently agreeing on their next course of action. "Thank you, Admiral," Keith said. "We'll handle the interrogation. In the meantime, the Celestial Consortium representatives will brief you on the situation. There's going to be a lot of changes in the political landscape of known space." As Admiral Zara moved to confer with Zephyr and the alien delegation, Keith and Cora approached Draz. The scavenger captain's eyes darted nervously around the chamber, a mix of fear and awe on his face. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into," Draz said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "The power contained in this station. It could reshape the galaxy." "We know," Cora replied, her tone firm but not unkind. "And that's exactly why we need to understand how you learned about the artifact network. The security of countless worlds depends on it." As they prepared to begin the interrogation, Keith felt a renewed surge of energy from the station's core. The artifact network was fully awakening, and with it, a new chapter in galactic history was about to unfold. He and Cora stood at the center of it all, their hybrid nature the key to unlocking the ancient system's true potential. The challenges ahead were immense, but as Keith looked at Cora, he felt a sense of certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together as partners, protectors, and perhaps something more. The station hummed around them, a testament to the incredible journey that lay ahead. The station hummed around them, a testament to the incredible journey that lay before them. In the days that followed, Keith and Cora found themselves immersed in an intensive training program designed to unlock the full potential of their hybrid abilities and master the intricacies of the artifact network. The Celestial Consortium had assembled a team of experts, each specializing in different aspects of the ancient station's operations. Keith wiped sweat from his brow as he finished another grueling simulation. The holographic environment faded away, revealing the stark white walls of the training chamber. Cora stood beside him, her chest heaving with exertion. "That was intense," Keith said, catching his breath. Cora nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "But we're improving. Did you feel how the energy fields responded more quickly this time?" Before Keith could respond, their alien instructor, Vril, approached. The tall, slender being's iridescent skin shimmered as it moved. "Excellent progress," Vril said, its melodious voice filled with approval. "You're beginning to anticipate the network's responses. Tomorrow, we'll move on to more advanced energy manipulation techniques." As Vril left to prepare the next day's training regimen, Keith and Cora made their way to the station's central hub. The crystalline structure at its core pulsed with a steady rhythm, its facets reflecting the soft light of the surrounding holograms. "I still can't believe how much we've learned in such a short time," Cora said, her eyes scanning the displays of galactic data that floated around them. Keith nodded, reaching out to manipulate one of the holographic interfaces. As his fingers brushed the glowing symbols, he felt a surge of energy course through him. The station systems responded instantly, bringing up a detailed view of a distant star system. "It's like the more we train, the more intuitive it becomes," he mused. Suddenly, the holographic display flickered, and a new set of controls materialized before them. Keith and Cora exchanged a puzzled glance. "Did you activate something?" Cora asked, her brow furrowed. Keith shook his head. "I don't think so. This looks like..." Before he could finish his thought, a wave of energy pulsed through the station. The walls around them began to shift and reconfigure, revealing hidden corridors and chambers that had been seamlessly integrated into the structure. "We need to alert the others," Cora said, reaching for her communication device. As she did so, a holographic message appeared before them. The alien script quickly translated itself into a language they could understand. "Hybrid caretakers identified. Initiating full station activation protocol." Keith and Cora watched in awe as new rooms materialized around them. Living quarters, recreational areas, and research facilities, all designed for long-term habitation, took shape before their eyes. "It's like the station was waiting for us," Keith said, his voice filled with wonder. They began to explore the newly revealed areas, their enhanced senses taking in every detail. As they rounded a corner, they came across a sealed door unlike any they had seen before. "What do you think this is?" Cora asked, running her hand along the smooth surface. As if in response to her touch, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Beyond it lay a vast laboratory filled with equipment they didn't recognize, and containers holding various biological samples. "This must be some kind of research facility," Keith said as they stepped inside. They moved cautiously through the lab, their eyes drawn to a series of stasis pods along one wall. Inside each pod was a perfectly preserved specimen of an alien species they had never encountered before. "Could these be..." Cora began, her voice trailing off as realization dawned. "The precursor race," Keith finished. "The creators of the artifact network." As they examined the pods, Keith's elbow accidentally brushed against a nearby console. A warning klaxon blared, and a robotic voice announced, "Containment breach detected. Initiating emergency quarantine procedures." Before they could react, a shimmering energy field sprang up around them, sealing off the section of the lab they were in. Through the translucent barrier, they saw a broken vial on the floor, its contents spreading in an iridescent puddle. "Keith," Cora said, her voice tight with concern, "I think we've been exposed to whatever was in that vial." As if to confirm her words, Keith felt a strange tingling sensation spreading through his body. He looked at Cora and saw that her skin had taken on a faint, otherworldly glow. "We need help," Keith said, activating his emergency beacon. Within minutes, the lab was swarming with activity on the other side of the quarantine field. Dr. Vex, the lead medical officer of the Celestial Consortium, approached the barrier, his multifaceted eyes scanning them intently. "What's happening to us?" Cora asked, her voice wavering slightly. Dr. Vex consulted a handheld device, his expression unreadable. "The pathogen you've been exposed to. It appears to be interacting with your hybrid physiology in unexpected ways. Instead of causing harm, it seems to be accelerating the integration of your human and Elysian genetic traits." As Dr. Vex spoke. Keith became acutely aware of changes occurring within his body. His senses sharpened even further, and he could feel an unprecedented level of connection to the station's systems. "The station," he said, looking at Cora. "Can you feel it?" She nodded, her eyes wide. "It's becoming an extension of ourselves." Dr. Vex and his team worked tirelessly, monitoring their condition and developing a plan to safely extract them from the quarantine area. As hours turned into days, Keith and Cora found their abilities growing exponentially. They discovered they could access previously locked sections of the station's database simply by concentrating. Information about other hybrid pairs throughout the galaxy flowed into their minds, revealing a vast network of caretakers they had never known existed. As they absorbed this knowledge, a troubling discovery came to light. Keith sensed a hidden subroutine within the network's core programming, a fail-safe mechanism of unimaginable power. "Cora," he said, his voice grave, "there's something we need to discuss. I've found a protocol buried deep in the system. If activated, it could reset the evolutionary path of countless species across the galaxy." Cora's eyes widened as she processed the information. "We can't let that happen. We need to find a way to safeguard against its activation." As they grappled with this new responsibility, Dr. Vex's voice came through the communication system. "We're ready to begin the extraction process. The decontamination chamber is prepared, but I must warn you, the procedure will be intense." Keith and Cora shared a determined look. They knew that once they emerged from quarantine, they would face challenges greater than any they had encountered before. The fate of the artifact network, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested in their hands. As the decontamination sequence began, energy fields pulsed around them, and Keith reached out to take Cora's hand. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Together, as the decontamination sequence intensified, Keith felt Cora's grip tighten on his hand. The energy fields pulsed around them, bathing their bodies in waves of purifying radiation. Keith closed his eyes, focusing on the connection between them and the station systems. Hours passed as the process continued, each moment bringing subtle changes to their physiology. When the fields finally dissipated, Keith and Cora stumbled out of the chamber, their legs unsteady after the prolonged procedure. Dr. Vex and his team immediately surrounded them, medical scanners whirring as they assessed the hybrid's condition. Keith blinked, his vision adjusting to the bright lights of the medical bay. He glanced at Cora and gasped softly. Her skin had taken on a subtle iridescent sheen, and her eyes seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. "Fascinating," Dr. Vex murmured, his multifaceted eyes fixed on a holographic display of their bio readings. "The pathogen has accelerated the integration of your human and Elysian genetic traits. Your physical abilities have been enhanced, and your connection to the artifact network appears stronger than ever." Keith flexed his fingers, feeling a surge of energy coursing through his body. He reached out with his mind, sensing the station's systems with unprecedented clarity. "It's incredible," he said, his voice filled with awe. "I can feel every part of the station, as if it were an extension of myself." Cora nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. "I can see." "More," she said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "The electromagnetic spectrum. I can perceive wavelengths I never could before." Their examination was interrupted by the arrival of Admiral Zara. The seasoned officer's eyebrows rose as she took in the hybrid's altered appearance. "I see you've undergone some changes," she said, her tone a mix of curiosity and concern. "I hope you're both feeling well. We have much to discuss." Over the next hour, Admiral Zara briefed them on the political developments that had occurred during their quarantine. A joint oversight committee had been established, with representatives from both human and Elysian governments set to arrive within days to tour the facility and discuss the implications of the artifact network's discovery. As the Admiral spoke, Keith found his attention drawn to a previously unnoticed section of the station's schematics floating in his mind. "Cora," he said softly, interrupting the briefing, "are you seeing this?" Cora nodded, her eyes unfocused as she examined the same mental image. "A hidden chamber," she whispered. "How did we miss this before?" Excusing themselves, Keith and Cora led the others to a seemingly blank wall near the central hub. As they approached, the wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing a hidden passageway. They stepped inside, finding themselves in a state-of-the-art medical facility, unlike anything they had seen before. Dr. Vex moved from station to station, his eyes wide with excitement. "This technology, it's far beyond anything we possess. It appears to be capable of further enhancing your hybrid physiology." Keith and Cora exchanged a look, silently weighing the potential benefits against the risks. After a brief discussion with Dr. Vex and Admiral Zara, they made their decision. "We'll do it," Keith said, his voice firm. "If this can help us better protect the network and maintain galactic stability, it's worth the risk." The enhancement procedure was unlike anything Keith had experienced before. As he lay in a pod filled with a glowing, viscous fluid, he felt nanomachines coursing through his body, rewriting his genetic code on a fundamental level. Beside him, Cora underwent the same process, their minds linked through the station systems. As the procedure progressed, Keith became acutely aware of the energy flows throughout the facility. The station's rhythms synchronized with his heartbeat, creating a harmony of biological and technological systems. He could feel Cora's presence more strongly than ever, their minds intertwining in ways that defied explanation. The process concluded just as alarms began to sound throughout the station. Keith and Cora emerged from their pods, their bodies humming with newfound power. They quickly made their way to the central hub, where Admiral Zara and a group of newly arrived government representatives stood before a holographic display of the galaxy. "What's happening?" Keith asked, his enhanced senses immediately picking up on the tension in the room. Admiral Zara turned to them, her eyes widening slightly at their altered appearance. "We've detected a massive energy surge in a distant sector," she explained. "A previously dormant node of the artifact network has activated unexpectedly." Cora stepped forward, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls with inhuman speed and precision. "The node is located in the Zarn system," she said, zooming in on a cluster of stars. "An isolationist species that's resisted all previous attempts at contact." Keith nodded, processing the information through his enhanced cognitive abilities. "This could destabilize the entire network if left unchecked. We need to investigate immediately." Admiral Zara agreed, quickly outlining a plan to send Keith and Cora as ambassadors to the Zarn system. The government representatives, though initially hesitant, recognized the urgency of the situation and gave their approval. Within hours, a specialized vessel was prepared for their journey. As Keith and Cora boarded the ship, they marveled at its seamless integration of artifact network and celestial consortium technologies. The craft responded to their thoughts, its systems interfacing directly with their enhanced physiology. As they settled into the ship's confined quarters, Keith became acutely aware of Cora's presence. Their enhanced bodies and deepened mental connection created an undercurrent of tension between them, a new level of intimacy that both excited and unnerved him. He pushed the feelings aside, focusing on the critical nature of their mission. The ship's engines hummed to life, responding to their combined will. As they prepared to depart, Keith felt the artifact network reaching out, creating a stable corridor through space-time for their journey. "Ready?" he asked, turning to Cora. She nodded, her iridescent eyes meeting his. "Let's go save all of the galaxy," she said with a small smile. As the ship accelerated into faster-than-light travel, Keith and Cora's minds merged with the vessel's systems, guiding it through the network's hidden pathways. The fate of countless worlds now rested in their hands, and the true test of their newfound abilities was about to begin. Begin. The familiar hum of the ship's engines filled Keith's senses as they accelerated into the vast expanse of space. The artifact network's hidden pathways stretched before them, a shimmering tapestry of energy and possibility. As they traveled, Keith found himself acutely aware of Cora's presence beside him. Their enhanced connection allowed him to sense the subtle shifts in her mood, the quiet grit that radiated from her. He wondered if she could feel the same from him, the mix of excitement and apprehension that churned within. Their journey through the network's corridors was swift, but as they approached the Zarn system, an unexpected turbulence shook the ship. Keith's enhanced senses immediately registered the cause. Energy-absorbing particles, he said, his fingers dancing across the control panel. They're interfering with our FDL drive. Cora nodded, her iridescent eyes scanning the readouts. We'll have to drop out of faster-than-light travel. Switching to sublight engines. The ship decelerated smoothly, its systems responding to their combined will. As they entered the Zarn system proper, their sensors came alive with activity. "Keith, look at this," Cora said, gesturing to a holographic display. "There's a massive artificial structure in orbit around the third planet." Keith leaned in, his enhanced vision picking up details that would have been invisible to normal human eyes. The structure was a marvel of engineering, a blend of organic curves and precise geometries that spoke of an advanced civilization. "It must be the source of the energy surge," he said. "But how do we approach without being detected?" Cora's lips curved into a small smile. "I have an idea. If we can modulate our ship's energy signature using our connection to the artifact network, we might be able to slip past their defenses." Together, they focused their enhanced abilities, reaching out to the ship systems. Keith felt the familiar rush of power as their minds merged with the vessel's controls. The ship's energy signature shifted, becoming a whisper among the background radiation of space. As they drew closer to the structure, Keith spotted numerous vessels patrolling the area. These ships were unlike anything he had seen before, part machine, part living organism, moving with an eerie grace through the void. "Zarn ships," Cora whispered, her voice filled with a mix of awe and caution. "Their biomechanical technology is incredible." Suddenly, a beam of energy lanced out from the massive structure, enveloping their ship. Keith felt the pull of an immense tractor beam, drawing them inexorably towards the construct. "We're caught," he said, fighting against the urge to panic. Our stealth didn't work. Cora's hand found his, her touch sending a jolt of reassurance through their connection. "We knew this was a possibility. Let's prepare for whatever comes next." They quickly donned their specialized exosuits, the advanced technology interfacing seamlessly with their hybrid physiology. As the ship was pulled into a vast docking bay, Keith's enhanced vision took in the alien landscape before them. Dozens of Zarn moved about the bay, their tall, slender forms gliding with inhuman grace. Keith marveled at their iridescent skin and the visible cybernetic implants that seemed to pulse with an inner light. "Ready?" Keith asked, his hand hovering over the airlock controls. Cora nodded, her posture tense but determined. "Let's do this." As they stepped out of their ship, hands raised in a universal gesture of peace, Keith reached out with his mind. He could feel the station systems humming around them, complex and alien, yet somehow familiar. Through their rudimentary connection, he gleaned fragments of information. "They've been trying to activate their own artifact node," he whispered to Cora. "That's what caused the energy surge." Before Cora could respond, a group of Zarn security forces surrounded them. Their cybernetic implants whirred and clicked, scanning the hybrid pair with obvious curiosity. After a moment of tense silence, one of the Zarn gestured for them to follow. They were led through winding corridors, each turn revealing new marvels of biomechanical engineering. Finally, they arrived at a vast chamber where a group of heavily augmented Zarn awaited them. Keith realized they must be facing the Leadership Council. Using a combination of their hybrid abilities and the Zarn's technology, a basic form of communication was established. The air filled with a symphony of clicks, whistles, and subvocal transmissions as information was exchanged. Keith learned of the Zarn's centuries-long effort to reverse-engineer an artifact node found in their system. Their recent breakthrough had sent unintended ripples through the galactic network, threatening the delicate balance Keith and Cora were sworn to protect. As they delved deeper into discussion, alarms suddenly blared throughout the structure. The artifact node, still not fully under Zarn control, began emitting pulses of energy that interfered with the alien cybernetic systems. Keith's heart raced as he realized the gravity of the situation. The node's instability threatened not just the Zarn, but potentially the entire sector. He turned to Cora, seeing his own grit reflected in her eyes. "We need access to your node," Keith said. His words translated into a burst of data the Zarn could understand. "We can help stabilize it." A tense moment passed as the Zarn leadership deliberated. Finally, they granted permission, and Keith and Cora were quickly escorted to a heavily shielded chamber. At its center pulsed the artifact node, its energy wild and untamed. As they approached, Keith felt the raw power washing over him. His hybrid physiology responded, adapting to the intense energy fields. Beside him, Cora's skin shimmered with an otherworldly light. "Ready?" he asked, reaching out to her both physically and mentally. Cora nodded, her hand clasping his. Together, they stepped forward, their enhanced abilities allowing them to channel and redirect the node's power. The process was grueling, requiring every ounce of concentration they possessed. Hours passed in a blur of pulsing energy and intricate manipulations of the artifact systems. Gradually, the node's emissions came under control. Keith felt it integrating with the larger galactic network, its power harmonizing with the greater whole. As the process neared completion, a new sensation washed over him, a faint echo of something ancient and vast. "Cora," he gasped, his eyes wide. "Do you feel that? It's like an imprint of the precursors themselves." Before she could respond, the chamber filled with a soft, pulsing light. The node had stabilized, its power now a steady heartbeat in sync with the galactic network. The Zarn leadership approached, their cybernetic enhancements gleaming in the node's glow. Through their makeshift communication, Keith sensed a shift in the Zarn's attitude. The success of the stabilization, coupled with the tantalizing glimpse of precursor knowledge, had opened new possibilities in their minds. As discussions began about the Zarn potentially joining the galactic community, Keith felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The strain of the node integration had taken its toll. He looked to Cora, seeing the same fatigue in her eyes. "We should return to our ship," he said softly. "There's much to process, and we need to report back to Admiral Zara." Cora nodded, her hands still intertwined with his. As they made their way back to the docking bay, Keith became aware of subtle changes in his body. New neural pathways seemed to have formed, his senses even sharper than before. Boarding their ship, they were presented with data crystals containing the Zarn's research on the artifact node. It was a gesture of goodwill, a first step towards greater cooperation. As they initiated the launch sequence, Keith felt the ship respond even more readily to his thoughts. He glanced at Cora, seeing the same look of wonder on her face. "Our abilities," she said, her voice filled with awe. "They've evolved again." Keith nodded, feeling both exhilarated and slightly overwhelmed by the implications. As their ship lifted off, leaving the Zarn structure behind, he knew that their journey was nowhere near the end. The data crystals held the promise of new discoveries, and their evolving abilities opened up countless possibilities. Setting a course back to the ancient station, Keith allowed himself a moment to marvel at how far they had come. From uncertain hybrids to key players in galactic events, their path had been anything but ordinary. As the stars streaked by outside the viewports, he wondered what challenges and wonders awaited them in the vast, ever-changing tapestry of the cosmos. Galaxy. As they approached the ancient station, Keith's enhanced senses picked up an unusual energy signature. "Cora, are you seeing this?" he asked, gesturing to the readout. She leaned in, her iridescent eyes narrowing. "That's not the station's normal output. Something's changed." As they docked, the differences became even more apparent. New sections had materialized on the station's exterior, their sleek designs a stark contrast to the ancient architecture. Keith and Cora exchanged glances, their shared concern palpable. Admiral Zara met them at the airlock, her usual composure tinged with urgency. "We have a situation," she said without preamble. "Follow me." As they walked, Keith noticed subtle alterations throughout the station. Familiar corridors now sported unfamiliar technology, a blend of precursor design and what appeared to be Zarn influence. The central control room had expanded, its original layout now augmented with new consoles and holographic displays. Admiral Zara gestured for them to gather around a central platform. "While you were in the Zarn system, the Oversight Committee uncovered evidence of a rogue faction," she explained, her voice tight. "They're attempting to gain unauthorized access to the artifact network." Keith felt a chill run down his spine. "Who are they?" "A mix of species," Zara replied, "all united in their desire to exploit the network's power for personal gain." Cora's eyes narrowed. "Have they made any progress?" Zara nodded grimly. "We believe they've already attempted several breaches. We need you two to investigate the station's systems thoroughly." Keith and Cora set to work immediately, their newly enhanced abilities allowing them to interface directly with the station's technology. As they moved through various access points, Keith became acutely aware of Cora's presence. The physical contact required for the diagnostic process seemed to heighten their connection, sending jolts of electricity through his body. Hours passed as they probed deeper into the station's core systems. Suddenly, Cora gasped. "Keith, look at this." He focused on the data stream she was examining. Buried deep within the station's coding was a hidden subroutine, dormant but potentially devastating. If activated, this could grant unrestricted access to the entire network, Keith said, his voice barely above a whisper. They reported their findings to Admiral Zara, who received the news with stubborn persistence. "We've just received intelligence that the rogue faction is planning an imminent attack," she informed them. "They've acquired advanced cloaking technology. Our conventional sensors won't detect them." Keith and Cora exchanged glances, a plan already forming between them. "We might be able to reconfigure the station's defenses," Cora suggested. "Integrate some of the Zarn technology we encountered." They set to work immediately, their bodies often pressed close as they manipulated complex energy fields and recalibrated sensor arrays. As they worked, Keith became aware of a new dimension to their abilities. The energy fields around them seemed almost visible, tangible in a way he'd never experienced before. "Cora, are you seeing this?" he asked, gesturing to the shimmering patterns in the air. She nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. "We can manipulate them directly," she realized. Together, they began crafting a network of interlocking energy barriers around the station. Each layer was designed to counteract different aspects of the rogue faction's expected weaponry. As they completed the defensive network, alarms blared throughout the station. The rogue faction had arrived, their ships decloaking as they launched their assault. "We need to neutralize that hidden subroutine," Keith shouted over the chaos. "It's the only way to ensure they can't access the network." Cora nodded grimly. "A full system reset. But we'll have to separate to hit all the access points simultaneously." For a moment, Keith hesitated, The thought of separating from Cora, even briefly, sent a pang through his chest. But there was no time for sentiment. They had a job to do. As they rushed to their assigned positions, waves of energy disruptions rocked the station. The rogue faction's weapons were unlike anything Keith had ever encountered, each blast sending ripples through the very fabric of space-time. Reaching his reset point, Keith began the delicate process of system recalibration. The energy coursing through his body was intense, pushing his hybrid physiology to its limits. Through their mental link, he could sense Cora experiencing the same strain. As the reset progressed, Keith became aware of a growing resonance between his body and the station's core systems. It was as if the boundary between flesh and machine was blurring, his consciousness expanding to encompass the entire structure. Suddenly, the mental link between him and Cora exploded into something far greater. In an instant, they were connected not just to each other, but to every system and subsystem within the artifact network. With this newfound control, they activated defenses hidden deep within the station's architecture. Massive tendrils of energy erupted from the structure, ensnaring the rogue faction's ships. Within the station itself, localized gravity fields activated, immobilizing the boarding parties that had managed to breach their outer defenses. Keith guided these defenses with his thoughts, his body glowing with the same energy that coursed through the station. Through his expanded awareness, he could sense Cora doing the same, their actions in perfect synchronization. As the immediate threat subsided, Keith made his way back to the central control room. He found Cora there, her body still shimmering with residual energy. As their eyes met, he felt the depth of their connection more profoundly than ever before. Before either of them could speak, a new presence made itself known within the artifact network. It manifested as complex energy patterns, interfacing directly with their hybrid physiology. Keith gasped as he felt his body changing once again, new potential awakening within his unique genetic makeup. As the energy pattern stabilized, Keith turned to Cora. Her eyes reflected the same mix of awe and uncertainty he felt. Whatever came next, they would face it together, their role as caretakers of the artifact network forever altered by the events of this day. As the energy patterns from the precursor presence continued to stabilize, Keith felt a gentle tug at the edge of his consciousness. He turned to Cora, seeing the same look of wonder and curiosity in her eyes. "Do you feel that?" he asked softly. Cora nodded, her iridescent skin shimmering with residual energy. "It's like a call. Something's drawing us deeper into the station." Without a word, they began to move, their bodies in perfect synchronization. Admiral Zara watched them go, understanding that this was beyond her jurisdiction now. As they navigated the twisting corridors of the station, Keith noticed subtle changes in the architecture. The walls seemed to pulse with an organic quality, the metal taking on a softer, almost living texture. Finally, they arrived at a section of the station that hadn't existed before, a seamless fusion of technology and nature. A door materialized before them, opening to reveal a chamber unlike anything they had ever seen. The room pulsated with a soft, organic glow that reminded Keith of the bioluminescent plants in the Elysian jungle where he had first encountered Cora. As they stepped inside, holographic projections sprang to life around them, filling the air with images of lush alien forests from across the galaxy. "It's beautiful," Cora breathed, reaching out to touch one of the projections. As her fingers made contact, the image rippled and expanded, engulfing them both in a vivid, immersive experience. Suddenly, Keith found himself back in the dense jungle of Alicia. The familiar sense of rich earth and alien flora filled his nostrils. Beside him lay Cora, her body racked with a mysterious illness that had nearly claimed her life. The scene was so vivid, so real, that for a moment Keith forgot it was a projection. Before he could react, the vision shifted. He saw flashes of alternate timelines, a galaxy where he and Cora never met, where the artifact network remained dormant, where civilizations tore themselves apart in endless conflict. The weight of these possibilities pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. As quickly as it had begun, the vision faded. Keith blinked, finding himself back in the chamber with Cora. Her eyes were wide, and he knew she had experienced the same visions. "We saw," she started, her voice trembling slightly. "Our purpose," Keith finished, the realization dawning on him. "We're not just caretakers of the network. We're meant to be living examples of what the precursors envisioned, symbiosis between different species, a bridge between worlds." Acting on pure instinct, Keith reached out and took Cora's hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, a surge of energy coursed through them. Their bodies began to glow with an intense, pulsating light that seemed to resonate with the very core of the station. Keith felt his consciousness expanding, stretching beyond the confines of his physical form. He was aware of Cora beside him, her presence a constant anchor as their minds merged with the artifact network. In an instant, their awareness encompassed the entire galaxy. Through this cosmic perspective, Keith and Cora could sense the ebb and flow of life across countless worlds. They detected pockets of conflict, suffering, and environmental destruction. Without speaking, they knew what they had to do. Using their newfound abilities, they began to subtly influence events across the galaxy. On a war-torn planet, they nudged opposing factions towards dialogue. On a world facing ecological collapse, they activated dormant artifact nodes to help stabilize the environment. As they worked, Keith became aware of changes in his physical form. His body felt lighter, more fluid. He glanced at Cora and saw that she too was changing. Their forms were taking on an ethereal quality, allowing them to phase through the station's walls and traverse vast distances in the blink of an eye. Despite these changes, Keith was relieved to see that they still maintained their core characteristics. He could still see the human in his reflection, just as Cora's Elysian features remained distinct. They were truly a bridge between worlds now, existing in a state between the mortal and the cosmic. As they continued their work, guiding civilizations and preserving endangered ecosystems, Keith and Cora realized the enormity of their task. The galaxy was vast, and two beings, no matter how evolved, couldn't manage it alone. "We need to create more like us," Cora said, her thoughts flowing seamlessly into Keith's mind. "A new generation of hybrid caretakers." Keith nodded, already seeing the possibilities. They returned their focus to the station, using its advanced medical technology to establish a program for volunteers from various species. These individuals would undergo a similar transformation, becoming part of a growing network of galactic guardians. As the first group of new hybrids began their training, Keith and Cora found themselves drawn back to where their journey had begun. They materialized in the clearing on Alicia where they had first met, the lush jungle unchanged by the passage of time. Standing there, surrounded by the vibrant life of the forest, Keith felt a profound sense of completion. He turned to Cora, seeing in her eyes the same mix of love, purpose, and cosmic awareness that he felt. "Are you ready?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Cora smiled, her form shimmering with ethereal energy. "Always." As one, they began to merge with their surroundings. Their physical forms dissolved, becoming one with the jungle itself. Keith felt his consciousness spreading through the planet's biosphere, nurturing and protecting all life. Even as he became part of Alicia, he maintained his connection to the artifact network and his role as a guardian of galactic harmony. In this new state of being, Keith and Cora's love and purpose had transformed into something greater than themselves. They had become living symbols of unity, their story a testament to the incredible potential that exists when different worlds come together. As the sun began to set on Alicia, casting a golden glow over the vibrant jungle, Keith knew that their journey was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders and challenges yet to be discovered, and they would face it all together, as they always had.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.